Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Halton Catholic District School Board Policy Committee meeting for Tuesday, November 12th. I'd just like to remind everybody that this is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel. We'll start with item 1.1, the opening prayer, and we'll have Trustee Ian Tomasi lead us. Thank you, Trustee Ian Tomasi. And just to note that we have Trustee Ian Tomasi, Trustee Carabella, and Superintendent Loss all joining us on the telephone this evening. So we'll move along to item 2.1, approval of the agenda. Please note that we're rearranging the order of the agenda this evening. So item 4.3 will be dealt with first, item 4.5 second, and then we will join back in the regular order as listed. So can I get a motion to accept the agenda as revised? Trustee Duarte, seconded by Trustee O'Brien. Item 2.2, the approval of the minutes from October 10th, 2019. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes as presented? Trustee Duarte, seconded. Trustee O'Brien. All in favor? Trustee Carabella?
In favor.
Okay, minutes approved. So moving on to item 4.3. This is on page 15. It's policy II-51, optional French programming, French immersion and extended French.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Declaration of conflict of interest.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed item 3. Do we have any declarations of conflict of interest? None? So we're moving on to item 4.3. So we have Fred Thibault, who's going to present for us, and is Superintendent Percassant as well? Yes? Both of you? Okay. Thank you. Just out of curiosity, how long is your presentation?
So through you, Madam Chair, the presentation tonight is just to summarize the body of the report that we put forward as an additional supplementary information report. So tonight what I'd like to do briefly on this is to go over the scope of the analysis that planning services in collaboration with school services and curriculum service work towards. I want to discuss the two research policy in that board to look into this as it relates to the sibling rule on a cross-boundary and a priority access to the program. And then we'll go through some of the infographics that you'll see attached in your report. It's Appendix B, and the purpose of those graphics are just to visualize what the accommodation pressures or issues may happen with the cross-boundary. So with that, in terms of the scope of the analysis, what we sought to do is, again, to respond to the Policy Committee request to report to attach to the present report before you tonight. And two questions were asked as part of this. Sorry, before I forget. Apologies. Two research questions were provided. The first one that we looked at, research question A, was what would be the impact if you provided priority access to siblings of French students to the French program, and not require them to participate in a lottery. So what's the impact to the non-sibling students entering for the first time? And then the second research question is, what is the impacts to providing immediate access for students that are siblings of students in the French program, cross-boundary status, without adhering to the operational policy I-04, which manages and regulates accommodation pressures at schools. All right, so in terms of research question A, I'll just break it down simply. So the question was, is there a reduction in odds to non-sibling families entering time into the program? What we looked at here is that if we assume that there is a cap to a program and there is a number of applicants, if you provide priority access to the siblings, then it reduces the total amount of seats available, and therefore the remainder is left over for the non-sibling families. So with that, what we did find is that, looking at the logic here, if you were to provide priority access to a sibling of a French program student, you're effectively reducing the odds of a non-sibling student to go in, whereas the chances for a student that is a sibling, then you give them a 100% chance. So there's kind of a discrepancy in terms of the equity of access to the program. So that was the results of this study, which was just more of a smaller overview of what that would look like. The second research question is more aligned with the question of what would be the impacts of the English Stream program and overall accommodation pressures, utilizations at other schools, if we were to allow cross-boundary access for all siblings of students that are entering into, or of students that are already in the French program. So for this, the logic behind it is that in adding more students to a student population in a school, you're effectively increasing the overall utilization of said school. The one thing that's particular about a lot of our French program schools is that they're already near or projected to reach overall utilization. So at the end of the day, what you're looking at, and some of the results that we've seen throughout the vast majority of all of our programs, is that in opening it up to cross-boundary students, in addition to the regular stream students that are already attending the school that are in boundary, as well as the FI program students that, again, are in boundary, and you're adding the cross-boundary, we're effectively adding more pressure to that school. We'll go into the school-by-school analysis, but I'd just like to present the overall results that we found from this, generally speaking. And what we've concluded is that there is, in fact, an impact on the English Stream program in a few ways. First and foremost, if you compare the overall utilization of what our schools are today, the FI program schools, both early and extended French, for the early French program, those schools will increase in their utilization by about 14% overall. What this means is an increase board-wide of approximately 17 portable classrooms, and by allowing more cross-boundary students into these schools, it's kind of you're just transferring those from another school that are in a regular track program. So you're effectively creating smaller classrooms of those students moving to the French program. So in the end of it all, what we saw with the FI program specifically, overall board-wide, you're creating 17 empty classrooms elsewhere. So that might be distributed between, reductions in portables, perhaps, or it can also be schools that are under utilization already, you're creating additional classrooms. So you combine that with the additional portables versus the additional empty classrooms, and you're almost paying twice. If you look at the extended French program, overall you're looking at an increase in utilization of about 5%, and then an additional 7 portable classrooms board-wide, 0.1 into those French program schools. Now, if you look at a little bit more on the qualitative side of what these impacts mean to the English Stream program, first, what you're going to see is that you're going to be adding more portables on site. So what does that mean? Aside from the fiscal cost associated to putting more portables, what you're essentially doing is creating less play area on the site, because we have a finite amount of land. You put on however many portables that are the size of a classroom, you're reducing and eating away at that. So that's either the asphalt flat top or the grass play area. The other thing that also occurs is as a school is overutilized over time, a school is built with specialized classrooms in mind for the overall capacity and maybe a little bit more with the portables. So as you're straining that portable count, the availability of specialized classrooms reduce, so either the gyms, the tech rooms, the library, the music room, because you have so many students and you have only so much scheduling time to rotate them into them. So we see that a lot. You know, an example would be Bishop Reading would be one where this happened. And it happens also in the larger Milton schools that we're starting to see expand. The other piece too is, as we're increasing the utilization of some of these schools, it may get to a point with emptying of others, increase of others, that you have to rebalance enrollment. So you're probably going to have to go through a school boundary review to reorient some of the regular track or the French program. So you're essentially disrupting the community, because if you get to a point where you have mass overutilization at one school because of the program, the regular track, and the siblings, and you have other schools that are underutilized, there's going to have to be a rebalancing completed to make sure that we're, you know, being effective in our resources and avoiding some of the issues that we mentioned beforehand. And last but not least, in reducing the overall size of other English track schools by sending cross-boundary students that should be directed there to others, you start decreasing the size of a school, which could mean that you lose a VP. It could mean that you have less flexibility in terms of managing your classroom sizes or specific student needs. So the smaller the school gets, the less flexibility the administration has to move things around and address student needs, whether it's, you know, placing them in another classroom or another teacher, or creating some diversity in the school. So the smaller the school gets, the harder that becomes. So that's another offshoot of impacts that may occur. Now, getting right into the analysis here, this is just, you have this in your package. It is at page, thank you, 31. Essentially what this shows you is how to read the graphics that we provided. So essentially, I won't go through all the details here, but what's most important is to see on the left-hand column what the current enrollment is at the school on the regular track, so that's your English program. You might see other programs as well, such as special education, or I think that's the only one that shows up. Then you have the FI, or extended French. That's also provided there in terms of their overall enrollment. And another thing that's important to note here is, and this is part of the analysis we did to make sure we're not double counting students, is that there are students that are in boundary in the regular track that are attending the French program. So what that means is that a student attending the French program might be in the same boundary as would be for a regular track student. So those students and their siblings would already be given as-of-right access to the school. So here in the example of St. Mary's, what this is showing us is of the 304 students that are attending the FI program, 35% of them are currently residing within the boundary of St. Mary's English track program, hence also their siblings, whereas 65% of the other attendees of the program are outside of that boundary, meaning their siblings would not have access to the program because they're out of boundary for the regular track stream. Is everybody okay with that concept? Okay, so that's kind of the crux of it. So based on those out-of-boundary students, that's what we use to estimate the number of siblings that you get over a 10-year period. Those program attendees were to also bring their siblings. So in this case, if you look at the full cohort over 10 years, you would have 102 students that would be technically cross-boundary, and if we were to allow them immediate access, that is essentially what you're adding to the overall utilization of the school, which then we move into these infographics over here. Here in the center is your functional building capacity of the school, so that's what the school is built for physically. So you can fit approximately 599 students in St. Mary's. The one next to it, those orange boxes, those represent the portables on site. Every site has a different maximum portable count. So in this case, St. Mary's has a total of 12 portable spaces available. And then the gray represents what's currently being used. If it's an empty box, it's not being used. If it's a yellow box, those are the additional portables that we're adding on because of the siblings. If it, well, as we go through it, you'll see it in Milton. You see a red portable, that means we've now exceeded the maximum portable count on that site, and we can't add any more than that without significant investments to do so. And those orange bounded in red would also represent those that are caused by siblings that have pierced the overall capacity of the school. The graphic here, the blue represents what's inside of the school, so that's your functional building capacity. Then you have a line that represents the 90 to 100% utilization. That is, I'll call it the sweet spot as to where a school is best utilized, between 90 to 100, where we consider it effectively full. When you look at the classroom organizations, you're never going to have a perfect 23 per classroom or 26 for FDK. So that's where the school, all the classrooms are being utilized. And that's what we look to when we're determining the cross-boundary are closed. Beyond that, at the FBC line here, anything beyond this is the amount of portables that we're adding on site because of the enrollment that's currently there. And next to it, in orange, would be the additional siblings we'd be adding to the site. Lastly, the summary here just compares what the 2019 numbers are currently versus to the right of it, the 2019 cross-boundary, what those current enrollment numbers would look like if we would have allowed cross-boundary status over the previous 10 years. All right. Is there any questions before we jump into the actual infographs by school?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Trustee Carabella.
Thank you. So when you talked about immediate access for the 102, were you just referring to the
Through Madam Chair, that would be all grades that would be going through the program. So if we're going to permit all students to have cross-boundary access, we have to look at it for every single grade. That's correct. So we're looking at the full term because we're not able to determine it's hard to predict which family is going to come in at what time. You might have age gaps of 1 to 2 years, you might have age gaps of 4 years. Again, the time that they enter is really unknown. So you might have a student that's in EFI that's in grade 5 right now, that their sibling comes in the JK. So as that pendulum moves forward, as the student moves forward, they're always entering at different points. You can even have situations where, maybe the other student isn't attending the French program but wants to go in the same school. So we looked at it holistically as what would be the maximum impact in allowing this, because once you allow cross-boundary, you allow it to all the students that are, part of that French cohort. So that's the way that we've analyzed it.
Trustee O'Brien?
And just to follow up.
Sorry, Trustee Carabella?
Numbers are
Through you, Madam Chair, just as a point of clarification, this is more any student that can enter the school, whether it's the regular track program, and the EFI, you are correct, they would have to enter into the grade 1 cohort unless they're proficient in French throughout. But here what we're looking at is if we would allow cross-boundary status throughout the entire process, whether they're regular track or early French or what have you. So that's the main thing, is how many siblings could we expect from our French students that are attending that school.
Trustee O'Brien?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So, Fred, to read this graph right, if tomorrow you allow cross boundaries at St. Mary's tomorrow, it would be at full capacity, with portable capacity and everything, right?
Through you, Madam Chair, so that 102 wouldn't be the immediate, that's over a 10-year period. So every year you would be adding 10 kids. So that's why we look back to the past and we said if we would have done this over that period of time, right now, today, in like an alternate policy direction, we would have had an additional 102 students. Yeah.
Trustee DeRosa?
Through you, Madam Chair. Have we attempted to estimate on a medium term and maybe long-term basis If we had the capability of building capacity with no limitations, what kind of capacity would have to build given the demand that we have today?
Through you, Madam Chair, I would say that if you gave me all the money, I would say that we wouldn't be building capacity. I would say that we would be filling empty spaces within our classrooms first and foremost, and all the additional capacity that we would be building over time in our high growth areas, we would be building new schools, and over time, we would be addressing the overutilization of those areas. So, if I were to look at Burlington, if you distribute the enrollment, and you make sure that, you know, you have enough capacity, you can spread the programs out in such a way where you either have fewer portables or they're all within bricks and mortars, if you were to do that. Oakville, same thing, we have a lot of excess capacity that we can be directing some of these students to. So I'd say we wouldn't be building more, we would just be redirecting to areas that we have space.
So I think what I'm hearing through that is that the capacity is there, it's just not allocated in the right places.
Through Metro, that it's just, yes, if we're creating too many, or if we're creating additional pressures on a school, then yes, we would create a situation where, you know, we're emptying out one school to overfill or overutilize another. So we have to be careful with that. It's a balancing act.
Thank you.
Is there any other questions? I would suggest, Fred, in regards to this, as opposed to going through each school, if you could just point out to us and maybe focus in on ones that are different than what has been shown here, because I noticed that there's still there's quite a few schools to go through in regards to the stats. So let's focus in on the ones that that aren't similar to St. Mary's, so you can show us a little bit of a difference of a 10-year projected. Are we all okay with that? Okay?
Absolutely, and if there's any ones that you would like to see particularly, please let me know. Yeah, most of these schools are all the same. A lot of them are, like I was saying, they're already over capacity. Bridget is the same. When you say different, what do you, just to clarify?
So you've got St. Mary's. If you were to apply the sibling rule at the full 10 years, you're looking at 145% capacity. Something that doesn't hit the 145% capacity. It was just if we can go through maybe the ones, like for example, like if we look at Sacred Heart, it looks like after 10 years, even though the siblings are similar number, the capacity is only at 119% utilization, so.
Absolutely, okay, now I understand. So in this case, yes, so if we look at Sacred Heart of Jesus, right now the school is operating at 99%, with the future, so I'll just speak to today's, I won't talk about future development and whatnot. So right now it's operating at 99%. If we were to have allowed siblings throughout the last 10 years, what it would have effectively done is add an additional 4 portables and increasing the utilization by 20% over. And again, those 4 portables, those would be generated, those students would be generated from pulling other schools that are within the Burlington area because it's the full municipality. Let's look at Milton. Milton is an example where St. Scholastica, so this is an example where all of the schools within Milton are significantly, or are all over capacity, and it's kind of a game that we have to play in moving the program, because the program in itself is very large, and it's very hard to fit into one particular school. It's about 350 plus or minus students, depending on the attrition of grades over time. So in this case here, we've located the St. Scholastica program, the EFI program at St. Scholastica, which right now is in its 2nd year of opening. So although the numbers here show that 66% of the regular track students are there, as well as the FI students, we only have 1 grade rolled out so far. We still have another 7 to add, so 46 every year, minus the attrition. If we were to look at siblings, we would be adding 115 students, and that's just from today. What I've done here is I've shown you in 3 years what this looks like, because Milton is a rapid growing area. So here in 3 years, the regular track enrollment booms. The FI population increases by 2 grades, therefore you're adding 92 students. So right off the bat, you've pierced your portable capacity within a 3-year period, and then we have to find a home for the program to be relocated, which is kind of what happened in Halton Hills too, where we're having difficulties in finding a home. So in Halton Hills, we split the program so that it could fit in 2 locations, because it can't fit in one particular location on its own without completely disrupting the regular track program.
Madam Chair?
Madam Chair?
Okay, so trustee Murphy and then trustee Untamasi.
Fred, so that brings up the point then, if we have underutilization and we can split the program between schools, then why don't we do that?
Well, in Milton, for instance, that would be, it's difficult until you have a home for it and you have a school that's significant. You're almost looking at a school that's 50% utilized that you would need, again, because the program in itself is about 300 students at full term, and then you figure you still have the regular track population, a healthy population that we're always trying to achieve is around the same. You're looking at a school about 700 right off the bat. So in certain circumstances, even splitting the program, you'll have some difficulties, especially a program of this size. We've done similar things with regard to the extended French program, which only has a 4-year rollout. So we split it between Lumen and Our Lady of Fatima. That's an example of where that was effective because it's not as significant. You're looking at a full rollout of between 100 and 160, whereas EFI it is a significant program. And there's also, maybe on a programming standpoint, but there are also advantages in trying to keep all the resources in one place for FI. So it's a difficult one. We did the Halton Hills example where you're doing a 1 to 5 and then a 6 to 8. That's an example of it. So at least you're keeping your 2 classrooms. You still have that flexibility to interchange between classrooms to address student needs. And then you move to another location afterwards. That's something that we can look at. Yeah, there's multiple ways that we can address some of these capacity issues.
Yeah, I guess just from our perspective, there seems to be high demand for this program. It's not going away anytime soon. So we need to find a solution, and it seems like capping the number or is not going to solve our problem, right? So that's kind of, I think, what we're looking for is how do we solve this problem and getting more kids into the program or meeting the demand of this program, I guess, is the challenge that we're kind of looking at or faced with. So looking at creative ways to, so the assumption is we need more capacity, we need more classrooms. If we keep it capped, this isn't going away. We're going to be dealing with this for quite a while, right? So that's kind of my thought is how do we look at increasing the capacity of the program? Not necessarily utilization, but the program.
Maybe just a quick point of clarification to your point, Trustee Murphy. Just to clarify, this is more an analysis as what it looks like if we allow siblings to enter the program and what additional impact that would have over the utilization of the school, not necessarily the impact of the French program being rolled out overall. So this is one particular example in Milton. The other schools like Sacred Heart of Jesus, you almost have the full program rolled out in that school. And it's working because you have that nice balance. It's just in very high growth areas where we're still waiting on that next school because of the rapid regular stream growth that this problem occurs with the overutilization. But I do hear what you're saying.
Trustee Untamasi, you had a question?
Maybe I'll just go back into it. So the the regular track, this is a bad example for now. Let's take Sacred Heart. So let's walk through this example. Currently, as of 2019, there's 272 students in the regular stream, plus the 271 FI, which for Sacred Heart of Jesus...
Which one I understand, but can you...
Sacred Heart of Jesus.
example are you?
He's on page 32, Sacred Heart of Jesus, Vince. Page 32? You're welcome.
So with regards to Sacred Heart of Jesus, I'll just start from the top again. Because we're within that 99% bar, the 272 and the 271 students overall make up that 99% utilization. So if I look at and in addition to that, I believe that, yes, that's the grade 1 to 7 program. Is that where you're not seeing the arithmetic pan out?
Well, actually, my arithmetic isn't adding up anywhere, simply because when I look at utilization and I look at functional capacity, and then I superimpose the 10-year demand, it doesn't equate to our enrollment. It's way off. So my question again to you is, how are you making the predictions that you are when the numbers don't add up?
All right, so let's walk through it. So 272 plus 271 gives me about 543 students, divided by 547 gives me 99%. So that's the current. And then if I were to add,
Utilization.
yeah, that's the blue current utilization without siblings, 99%. And if I
Okay.
add 272 plus 271, that gives me 543 plus the sibling of 106, gives me 649. In 10 years, yeah. Well, it's kind of, so it's if we were to, if 10 years ago we started doing siblings, we would have added 10 over that 10-year period. So I'm trying to compare 2019 with 2019, because if I'm doing projections in the future, we're adding too many assumptions. Then we're looking at development, we're looking at attrition, we're looking at progression factors. So I'm just trying to show you what the equivalency would be if we would have been doing this as this.
So I agree with that, but how are you adding in the maximum portable capacity? Is that being added in after?
I understand. Pardon me, Trustee Antomasi. So if the 118% utilization is based on strictly the functional building capacity. So if you were to do the 272 plus 271 plus a total enrollment with siblings of 649, then you would divide that by 47, which would give you the 119% utilization. The max portable capacity is just to demonstrate how many additional students we can put on the site over the building. So, yeah, so just to clarify, utilization when we look at it is always based on the building itself, because that's what we strive for. Anything above that means...
You're not adding in the portables.
No, that is correct. We're not adding it in. And if you notice that red line up in here, this is kind of that's the hard stop there. That's where things get problematic. That red line where portable capacity is. So that would represent where we've hit our overall maximum site capacity, both permanent and temporary.
Yeah, that's okay, I got it. Fine, thank you.
Which, correct me if I'm wrong, that the only one where we see that red line come in is in the growth in Milton at St. Scholastica, correct? Or maybe St. Bridget. I don't see any, I say we're there already.
No, through you, Madam Chair, that's correct. Right now, St. Scholastica is the only one that we hit that limit. Well, we hit it at Bridget, where we would reach the maximum. But again, for us, it's, when we're looking at this, it's not ideal to have that many portables on site, because it does have impacts. And especially when you have empty classrooms in other areas, it becomes problematic. So that's the EFI. I went through some of those. Maybe I'll take a couple examples of extended French. So extended French is a little bit different. There's only 4 grades, so you'll notice that the sibling cohorts aren't as large as the EFI, where there's a full 8th grade cohort impacting it. So again, similarly, St. Gabriel's is another one where there's an example of less portable capacity because of the site constraints, so each school is different. So in this case, we're already in portables and we would be adding a few additional ones. An interesting one where we don't have portable capacity would be Holy Rosary Milton, where this is the type of school where we really want to be careful we're adding any kind of additional student beyond what's in the boundary, because if you, between that 90 to 100%, you can still have a situation where you don't have enough classrooms depending on how your classroom organizations shake out. So that's one where absolutely we cannot put a portable on site, so we have to be very careful. And the theme on some of these too is where you might start seeing they're close to cross boundary because of these facts here. Because there's a risk of either we're overutilizing a school more than we need to, or we don't have the capabilities of adding additional portables. Our Lady of Peace is an example of a school that over time the program will be phased in. Right now it's just in its first year of operations. There's another 3 years, so you're adding another, right now there's only 18, but as that program grows and gains more prominence in that area, you might be looking more at the 25, so then you add another, potentially 60 to 75 students. And what we're showing there is that over time, when the program fully rolls out, then you're going to be hitting your 100% utilization. And yes, St. Joan of Arc is an example of a school that, again, it's going to roll out over time, but it's still open to cross-boundary because we don't foresee there being a significant issue with overall utilization. So this is one where, because we're not concerned within the next 5 years to pierce the capacity, we leave it open to cross-boundary. So this is an example where, it's not prohibited, but just not an issue. So with that's a few examples. If anybody wants me to delve a little bit deeper in any particular one, please let me know.
Trustee Dort?
Madam Chair, question. Your projection for 10 years, for example, since Scholastica says 115 extra children would be there, but in reality, we are not going to wait 10 years to get to that number. We are going to evaluate and re-evaluate the utilization of the schools, right? For example, again, in Milton, in the area of St. Scholastica, 3 new elementary schools are going to come up. So the number projected is just for projection purpose, for demonstration. Is that what you're saying? It's not reality at all?
That's correct. This is just to show if this would have been our standard practice, this is what would have, or what could potentially happen. Milton is as you pointed out, and as you can see by a lot of the FI programs that are spread, St. Peter's, Benedict, Scholastica now, we're in constant accelerated growth, so the program needs to shift. But if it were to stay there over time, that's what we could see. So yes, to your point, as new schools open up, maybe one day we'll be able to find a home for the program itself, and then realign things in such a way that makes sense for that.
Trustee DeRosa?
Through you, Madam Chair. That's an excellent analysis, but I can't shake the thought of, okay, what's the solution? How do we get in the front of this issue? Is there a practical solution that we can come up with? Because we know that it's a popular program. There's a certain demand. I heard tonight that it's not necessarily a problem of lack of capacity, but the allocation of capacity. The capacity is in the wrong places. It's a complex issue. It's a complex problem. But have we attempted to rationalize a solution to this, rather than just say no?
Sorry, I think we're just talking specifically about the siblings right now. I think you're talking about expanding the program. I think once we get into the policy, we can have a conversation about that, but right now we're asking Fred specific questions in regards to the sibling and the reports on this. So if we can keep to that right now, then we can have further discussion once we get into the policy.
Sure. My question stands, whether now or later.
Is there any other questions for Fred in regards to his presentation and the questions that we asked for it to be reported back on? No? Thank you.
Madam Chair, sorry.
We're live, Trustee Dewar.
Quick question here. We have Appendix 1. Could you just explain why some are open and why some are closed, cross-boundary status, the table, Appendix 1?
Absolutely, yeah. So the policy I-04 is the cross-boundary for It's the cross-boundary for non-residents and school attendance. In that policy, what the framework speaks to is that staff work and look into the long-term projections of the school and its overall utilization of what's going to happen within the next few years. And from that, what we determine is, within the next few years, are we going to get in the situation where we're going to bring the school to utilization that pierces the 100% capacity? So typically what we do is we look at schools over a forecasted period and we say, is it going to be within that 90 to 100% utilization? And if it is, then, and it's projected to continue doing so, then we close it to cross-boundary status, because we don't want to be creating pressures in areas when we know that there's available accommodations in others. So that's the way that we look at it. So the schools that are closed are schools that are either projected to continue growing over time and are above 90%, or are schools that are already above their overall utilization, and we don't want to create further strains on the schools by allowing additional cross-boundary students. Now again, there are extraneous circumstances that permit and just optional attendance when we're doing this.
Are we good? Okay. Is there any other questions?
I have a question.
Trustee Antomasi. Go ahead, Trustee Antomasi. Are you referring to the policy?
Reviewing the quote.
Okay, we're looking. Just one second, Vince.
2019, 2020.
It's up this year, Trustee Antomasi.
Sorry, can you repeat that, please?
It's up this year, Trustee Antomasi. It's on our schedule this year to be reviewed.
It's October, so it's not
All right,
this year.
thank you.
Oh, October.
Through you, Madam Chair, if the question is the cross-boundary school attendance policy, I-04, it's up for review in October 2020, the actual policy. Where did you see that? I have the schedule.
I'm just looking at it on the board page.
The policy says 2020, not 2019-20, but we had to move it because of the schedule, the three-year schedule.
So it is scheduled on our cycle for October 2020.
Well, no, so the board website just says next scheduled review, 2019, 2020. It doesn't have a month assigned to it.
Right.
It just says 2019, 2020.
Did we move that one for a
We
reason?
moved it because we had to move a whole bunch of stuff from last year into this year.
Oh,
Right, so
So-
I'm just going as it's published on the website.
sure, no problem, and thanks for the clarification. We'll change it on our website, and it was bumped because we had to move a number of policies from the spring into this year, which just moves everything along.
Okay, so that brings us into the actual optional French program. Thank you, Fred. Sorry. Brings us into the actual policy. Do we need to review it line by line, or do we have any comments? Sorry, Trustee Duarte?
Through Madam Chair, item 2, I think we discussed this before, where changes are made to item 2.3, where changes are made to location and family of school. For optional French program, the director will bring an information report to the Board of Trustees for the purpose of due notification and input. I think we discussed this before, and approval. Page 3 or 4, section 2.3. The reasoning is, when we open up a new program, it comes to the Board of Trustees for approval of the program. Similarly, when we are deciding to change a program or close a program, it should come to the Board of Trustees for approval.
I'm sorry.
Trustee O'Brien?
Where is this again? I'm looking.
Page 3 or 4 of the policy.
Okay. I'm on e-scribe, okay. 2.3, okay.
Any,
Can you just repeat what you are suggesting?
any other comments? Trustee O'Brien?
I would definitely agree with that. I thought for some reason that was already in here, but I'm glad you pointed that out.
I think, Trustee O'Brien, if you're looking, we did make changes under the requirements, I think, under 1.5 as well. There's some information in there as well that we've changed as well. This is just a second piece. Is any objections to that? No? Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, Trustee Carabella, and then Trustee Murphy. Yes,
What is
Trustee...
the change recommended?
Trustee Duart has proposed that, as opposed to the director just bringing it as an information item, that it be brought back to the board as an action item. Is that correct?
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
That's perfect, thank you.
okay. Trustee Murphy?
Yeah, my only concern is, I understand when we're canceling a program, the input of trustees, there's significant impact when we're canceling a program. My concern would be, with relation to changing the program, is there's operational issues that would be difficult for us to analyze and to provide value to that. So I would be concerned if trustees are involved at that point.
Trustee DeRosa?
Just a point of clarification, Madam Chair, through you. So if we read the sentence as it stands right now, it says, where the changes are made to location and family of schools for optional French programs, the director will bring an information report to the Board of Trustees for the purpose of due notification, feedback, and input. So what would be the natural result of the trustees offering feedback and offering input? Is this strictly, would the report be brought in just on the basis, hey, we've done this, this is what we've done? Or, hey, we've done this, what do you think? And can you recommend changes? What's the approach of that? Because one implies you're trying to gather consensus. The other one implies, you know, we're just giving you information, bringing you on side, the decision is made.
I believe that's to you, Secretary Daly. He looks like he's directing it as you.
And through you, Madam Chair. I think we probably learned from last year that it would make more sense to have the conversation first and to get input from trustees when we're going to move an optional program. We'd be able to explain the rationale behind it. I would, that would be the intent.
Trustee Agnew?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So is the idea then, so the way that I read this is that the changes are already made to the location, the family of schools, and then it's coming forward as an information item, like you said, based on what transpired previously. But the way I read it is that the changes have already been made, and then it's coming forward to us to give us advance notice, get our feedback, and provide any input. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, I think that's the way it's written right now, so, I think if you, I don't want to say reverse the order, but rearrange the order to say when changes are being contemplated, they're brought as information to the board for input and feedback, and then the discretion and responsibility remains with the Director of Education.
Trustee O'Brien?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So, Trustee Duarte, you're asking then, instead of that we approve the change of location, correct?
That's correct.
Trustee Agnew?
Could it be, instead of putting there as an action item, could we just not put word in there that is prior to changes being made?
That's acceptable.
Yeah? One information item?
Okay. So everything stays the same except for we say where changes are made. Prior to changes being made to location and family of schools for optional French programs. Does that work, Trustee Duarte?
Can we read that statement again?
So under 2.3, it would read, prior to changes being made to location and family of schools for optional French programs, and the remainder stays the same.
I'm trying to think of the issue that we had at the beginning of our
That would be...
term, and trying to make sure that does not occur again.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair.
Trustee?
I think that would, Trustee Duarte, I think that would satisfy that, because I think it's prior to any changes being made. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, whether it comes through as an information report, it can come through as an action report, we're still gonna have the same discussion. So I think my preference would be, is that just maybe before the decision is made and finalized, that we hear the staff rationale, we hear the information behind it, we hear all the understanding behind it, and then however we act on that, we act on that. But I'm just thinking that that might be the way to look at it, as opposed to leaving the wording and changing information to action. That's my thought behind it.
Andrea, and then Trustee O'Brien.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I also wanted to clarify that our new policy, community engagement and public consultation, actually has a specific requirement when it comes to change of program locations that says that I'll quote it for you, that details around the decisions will be communicated as they become available, and changes to program locations will be communicated to parents and guardians 1 academic year in advance of implementation. So that already kind of what happened last time around will not happen, because the concern was the time.
Trustee O'Brien?
So, question, what is that coming from?
What I just read? That's the policy on public consultation that you approved last year.
Trustee Duarte, is that acceptable to you?
I think, so yes, if you change it to prior to changes, it would work.
So I'll read again what it'll sound like. So prior to any changes being made, and then to location, and the remainder stays the same. Are we all okay with that? Trustee O'Brien? Thank you. Trustee Antomasi, Trustee Carabella? Are you okay with those proposed changes from Trustee Duarte, which is item 2.3? It would read, prior to any changes being made to location and family of schools, and the remainder of that piece stays the same. Trustee Carabella, were you able to hear me? Now we can hear you.
Okay.
Correct, except for instead of it coming after the change has been made, it would be brought to the Board of Trustees before the actual change was implemented. Okay, all right?
Yep.
Okay,
Because Dorothy was okay with that?
I'm sorry?
With that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, he is.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yep, all right.
Everybody seems to be okay with it, thank you. Okay, is there any other items? Okay, I'm gonna move to trustee O'Brien.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. My esteemed colleague over here brought up the concept of expanding the program. And if we look at the policy, there is a section under expansion that says where feasible and staffing permits. So it'll be that, it's 1.1 under requirements where feasible and staffing permits. I'm just wondering if this is a good time to talk about the report we got from Human Resources on the plan for staffing. This is a good time to talk about that, since that is one of the things in the expansion piece.
Sorry, trustee O'Brien, just to clarify, the plan, you're referring to the email that was sent with an update on,
Yes.
I don't believe that was actually the strategic plan, I think that was just an overview of,
Multi-year French teaching recruitment plan. I just want, this is a good time to talk about that.
sure, but I don't believe it was the actual plan that was sent
Right.
to us.
I got the multi-year French teaching recruitment plan report. That's what I got.
But I don't believe it's the actual plan, because if you read it, it's dated for November 2019.
Okay.
It's just, it's an overview.
Okay, is this a good time to talk about this, since it is...
I think it's part of the conversation.
Then through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to address this to Director Daly, to our Superintendent of Human Resources. One question I have in this multi-year French recruitment plan report, it does say, just for clarification, 2018-2019 school year, Human Resources Services staff attended 13 recruitment fairs with the province of Ontario. Staff were scheduled to attend the McGill University Job Fair in Montreal, Quebec, which unfortunately was oversubscribed. What does that mean?
Thank you. And through the chair, there were essentially, they had accepted more boards to attend than they were able to facilitate, and so we ended up getting canceled, as with a number of other boards. So so we did not attend that particular recruitment fair. We have gone and applied for a spot again for this year, and as of this point, we're in. But again, that can change. Right. Thank you.
Trustee Agnew?
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair, and I guess this will be to Superintendent O'Hara. Is there, I saw McGill referenced, and I understand why. Are there other similar, like I'm looking at Concordia, Bishop, like are there other post-secondary opportunities for us there to go and do that with?
There are. There's a couple of other possibilities. When we checked into them, they were smaller. And some of them, also, one of the challenges is that you want to be able to attract individuals here who also have a high English proficiency, and some of the locations don't necessarily have that. So for example, a better place to, or a possibility of another place to recruit would be New Brunswick, where it's a bilingual province. We did try New Brunswick a couple of years ago. Unfortunately, they've also expanded their French immersion program provincially, and so we were told by their deans that essentially they're expecting that all of their graduates were all going to be employed within province. So we've sort of put that on the back burner for a couple of years. I do think that New Brunswick is a possibility probably in another year. We have also gone to Nova Scotia in the past. We haven't had a lot of luck in terms of actually getting individuals to move from Nova Scotia here. A lot of it is cost of living. But as I said, there are other possibilities outside of McGill. Thank you.
Trustee Dorr?
Through Madam Chair,
Trustee Carabella, Trustee Dorr has the floor, and then you'll have it next.
through Madam Chair, question to Superintendent O'Hare. So I'm looking at the report here for 2017-2018. We conducted 35 interviews in 2018-2019. We conducted 40 interviews in a year for French. To me, these numbers seem to be really low considering our plan and our need and our want. So what else have we done besides, are we just waiting for, or are we being active and, making a great attempt to get more people? We need to attract people, so what do we do?
So those numbers are actually would actually be considered actually high. You have to understand that there's only about 450 graduates that are coming out of all of the Ontario faculties of education currently per year. There are 72 school boards that are all looking for French teachers, and we're a Catholic board. We only hire Catholic teachers. So of those 450, probably only about 33% or less are going to be Catholic. So if you kind of break that down, for us to be bringing in 35 applicants is actually pretty successful. There is a limited number of French people that are graduating with French qualifications. That's being reported by the Ontario College of Teachers. It is common knowledge. We are trying to get certainly what I consider to be more than our share of individuals to apply to us, and we do that by certainly selling our board. We're a growth board. Those individuals have job security, and we do go out to all the faculties where many boards do not, and we are going outside of province, even though we know in Quebec they have a teacher shortage right now, and they're having the same problems filling their schools with teachers, period. But we're still going there. We're still trying to get individuals. One of our successes this particular year was actually getting an individual from actually out west. He was and managed to, he applied. We arranged for him to get an interview, and we actually got an individual from Alberta to come and move here. So we're not getting a lot of luck from Quebec and New Brunswick, but we're accepting everyone. We're advertising widely.
Trustee Carabella? So just let me understand, Trustee Carabella, so you're making reference to the multi-year strategic plan, that it actually be listed as a reference so that it can be referenced back in regards to expanding the French program? So a report on the multi-year French teacher recruitment plan. Any questions about that? Is there questions about Trustee Carabella's? Okay, let's finish up with Trustee Carabella's part, and then I'll give you the floor. Is there any questions in regards to it? Is everybody favorable with adding that in? Yes? Yeah? Okay. So are we okay with adding it under references then? Or requirements?
I think it's a valid point. I think requirements would be better.
So would we tie it under 1.1? Like it kind of seems like it ties into that, right?
Like staff will report annually
On the multi-year for French, I think it needs to be specific to the multi-year recruitment plan. Yeah, under 1.1 then? Is that, Trustee Carabella, does that make sense under requirement? I know, I'm sorry, I know.
Putting it into entry requirements for,
So,
section 4?
no, under requirements, section 1, so 1.1.
Oh, 1.1, okay.
So it suggested that it go under there, because it ties into expanding the program. Okay, I think we've, Trustee O'Reilly? Is it regards to this? Okay, because Trustee DeRosa has the floor next.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sorry,
Just a very simple...
just let me finish this, and then you'll have it. So are we okay with this, Trustee Antomasi? I think
Yes, I'm fine with that.
Okay, so under 1.1 then we'll add the addition of the reference to the multi-year French recruitment plan, teacher recruitment plan. Okay? Trustee DeRosa, you have the floor.
Simple question for Superintendent O'Hara. How many French teachers did we hire this year, or last year for that matter? And did we meet the demand that needed to be met?
Again, we do have that detail in the report. There were 13 successful candidates that were interviewed, and 4 candidates were on our OT roster. And, so we hired 14 on a permanent basis, right?
So would you say we met
Right, so we certainly filled all of our permanent positions. So through our recruitment, our early intervention and hiring, we were able to fill all of our permanent positions. The challenge that we have is filling pregnancy, parental leaves, and illnesses throughout the school year, and that's a problem that all boards are facing. It's a supply and demand issue, so if you're a qualified French teacher, you're going for a permanent job, you're not usually looking for occasional work. Go and find and successful at that. Where we will continue to struggle is with that happen throughout and trying to find a qualified French teacher with the right kinds of skills for the 3 different tracks of French programs that we run.
I understand that the unexpected occurrences are always difficult to match up or meet, but the majority of the program, it's fair to say that we are successful most of the time at finding all the teachers that we need in order to meet our demand.
We use all of the possibilities and all of the flexibility that the ministry allows us to get either qualified teachers with French, or to look at next getting a qualified teacher who's able to speak French but may not have the French qualifications, or as a last resort, a qualified person who's not a qualified teacher. They're all the things that we have to look at in order to go and make sure that we've got what we consider to be a competent person in front of students. Thank you.
And through you, Madam Chair, Joe, would it be fair to say we start the year in terms of our permanent classroom positions, we're staffed. The issue arises when we have to backfill positions for the reasons that Joe mentioned. So that's where we run into some difficulties.
Sorry, Trustee O'Brien, you have the floor next. Sorry.
Thank you, through Madam Chair. To Superintendent O'Hara, you mentioned that we're going out of province to look for qualified French teachers. I know we have a very rigorous international student program where we go overseas, some even to places even to Asia. Would you consider going out of the country, say to France, to find French teachers?
Again, that would be through the chair. I will go and I'll send staff to wherever I'm directed. It's not something that we have done, that we've gone international, but if there's budget and it makes some business sense, I wouldn't discount it. Thank you.
Sorry. I do have a question. Can I just ask? Can we actually get the strategic plan that was created back in 2017 and how it's been met throughout from the motion?
Again, through you, what I produced is what we have. We have not gone and produced something to the letter of what Trustee Carabella had brought forward, and I guess what was going to be discussed at the last board meeting. We've brought information in terms of what we've been doing. We certainly brought that back in 2017. Again, that was to ad hoc. We have also been bringing information on our recruitment efforts through our human resources activity reports that I've been reporting back to senior staff and to the director through the strategic plan requirements. So what you have is certainly what I consider to be sort of the start of a formal report which we would be providing to you.
So, but there was a specific motion that was passed on November 21st that said that there was supposed to be a multi-year strategic plan for recruiting teachers that outlines year to year, because it was supposed to coincide with this program expanding, with the pilot and then with the program expanding. So are you saying that there isn't something that was done as a follow-up?
Yeah, again, through you, I'm not trying to be cute. We did all the work. We talk about French recruitment all the time. Was there a formal report that was given to trustees? No, there was not.
Trustee DeRose.
Just a follow-up question on the point of hiring French teachers. If we contemplated a degree of expansion of this program, would you consider the recruitment of teachers as a major roadblock to this, in view of the fact that we've been relatively successful in the past at meeting our capacity and our demands with French teachers?
Again, and through the chair, HR is responsible for finding teachers and filling holes. In terms of the quality of the individuals that we find, we work with curriculum services on assessing those needs and their requirements. What has been indicated, certainly in the past, is that not every French teacher we hire would be equal in terms of the types of needs that we need for the three streams that we have. And certainly, it's easier to find teachers to teach core French than it is for a French immersion program. So I think I'm answering your question. We certainly, you know, from my perspective, HR, if you tell us we need 14 teachers, we're going to find 14 teachers for you. In terms of how they fit into our needs, and whether they're meeting all of the curriculum level of needs, that really is for Superintendent Percassen. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm pleased to enter the conversation, but I don't want to, if it's not necessary. Leave it to you.
I guess, Trustee DeRosa, are you asking if we're in a position to expand the program at this time?
Of the expansion of the program, because every time we talk about the idea of expansion, it would seem to me, and maybe it's only my perception, is that the major drawback that is put forward is the recruitment of qualified teachers, and that's held us back. I'm under that impression. I may be completely wrong. That's to ascertain tonight through this questioning, because we've been relatively successful at meeting our current requirements. If we expanded by, I don't know, 10%, 20%, would the recruitment of teachers actually be a stumbling block to us being able to do that? That's what I'm trying to get at.
I think Trustee O'Hara just answered that in saying that whenever the program, Human Resources has been able to recruit the need. Where the fallback is the backfill with pregnancy leaves and sick leave. That seems to be our stumbling block.
So my takeaway is that it isn't a stumbling block. We'll figure it out.
Not to expand it, that's what I'm hearing. For recruitment.
Through you, Madam Chair, just an observation with regard to the quality of French delivery that we're looking for. We are looking at, there's a big difference for the fluency levels that we're after when it comes to French immersion program delivery versus core program delivery. We would want French teachers to be fluent in French and speaking in French as much as possible in their classes. I think what's really important to keep in mind is that while we can recruit teachers, we currently do have a mix of teachers. OCT, which is Ontario College of Teachers, qualified teachers with their FSL Part 1 qualifications in our classrooms. We also have in our classrooms currently individuals who are not teachers, but who are French speakers and who are teaching with the permission of the Ontario College of Teachers. We also then have a third level of teachers who are OCT qualified, but not FSL qualified, but are French speakers and have had successful interviews. And through the interventions that we have had, for example, in the curriculum department, we have a French consultant who works just with French. All of our other consultants have many other portfolios, and we have just the French consultant just working with French teachers. So that's something that we have dedicated funds to and time to ensure that our teachers get the professional learning that they need to keep our programs at a particular caliber of delivery level to get to that functional proficiency that we're after for our students. So currently, when we're talking about, so you have a picture of the situation that we're in, and we work very closely with Darlene Olchina of Human Resources when it comes to staffing. We currently have 6 positions for maternity leaves that we need to fill, and we don't have any candidates to fill them. So as those pregnancy leaves come up and the teachers go off, we fill them with supply teachers, usually unqualified French teachers, that we try to support as best we can from our end as we look for other teachers. We interview, I think, weekly for the most part, and to seek suitable individuals, but as was alluded in this conversation, we are an English board, so we require individuals who are fluent in English because that is the language in which we communicate with our parents as well as the language that we use on our. And so if we have individuals who are not fluent in English, that creates a lot of difficulty for us as an English board. So those are some of the things to keep in mind and some of the challenges that we have. So yes, we do find a way to fill those positions at the beginning of the year, but I want to be clear that they are not all filled with individuals who are fully FSL qualified and fully OCT. But we have changed a lot of ways interview on the spot when we recruit. We also offer teachers permanent positions so that we retain them. We've done a lot of things within the stipulations of the regulation in order to hire as many teachers as we can, and we have a number of initiatives to stay in touch with recruiting our alumni, which we have also been very successful with in the last year. So there are a lot of good things and a lot of things to celebrate, but I think the reality of recruitment isn't going away. And so I just wanted to clarify some points there. Thank you for the opportunity.
Trustee O'Brien? Trustee Dewar, sorry, my apologies, he didn't, Trustee Dewar.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I just wanted to know the latest numbers of students on the wait list in each of the areas. Milton, Oakville, Burlington, and Georgetown for French. There was a wait list last year. Just wanted to know what is the latest numbers, if anybody could tell me.
Through you, Madam Chair, the wait lists closed as of September 30th, so there are no current wait lists available. So any candidates coming through now for, let's say, grade 1, would be coming to us from other French immersion programs, either in the system or in other boards. They would be candidates to enter in at this point.
Just for clarity, I think he's looking for what was the wait list numbers at the start of the school year. He's looking for that information.
I'll find that and send it along to you if that's okay. I don't have that with me right now.
So basically, that wait list number which exists would be the current requirement of teachers to take care of those students, besides space in school. That would be one of the factors, right?
It would be through you, Madam Chair.
So the reason is, if we need to expand a program, we need teachers for that many number of students in the wait list.
Every year.
Every year.
Right.
Chair 2, Director Daly. Director Daly, are you planning on expanding the program?
I think we're planning on following the board policy that says when we can expand the program, we will expand the program. I think right now we're looking at our expansion into secondary and those plans. There's no doubt that in certain parts of the board, and certainly the information that Fred provided indicates in certain regions there is a demand. And as Trustee Murphy said, the conversations around French and French immersion in particular aren't going to go away with an unmet demand. So I think it's partially tied into our ability to recruit and retain teachers, which we are trying to work on. I think the other thing too is, although we've had our French immersion programs for a while now, I think another element of it is looking at how successful they are in terms of student retention. I think the demand up front and the demand at the other end and the success at the other end kind of go hand in hand.
Trustee O'Brien.
I'd like to make a comment. It is a bit of a catch-22. The more we put in now, the more we'll get our own back. I know the public board does that. They recruit their own. We're seeing a trickling effect. It's kind of like there's a demand, and we say we can meet the demand, but yet at the same time, if we don't put the demand out there, we're not going to meet it. So I don't know where to go with that. I mean, if we did expand it now, would the teachers appear? That's what I'm wondering. Is it like build it and they will come? That's what I'm wondering. Or are there just no teachers there? I'm kind of thinking of the same thing of Trustee DeRosa. Like, are the teachers even there? And if they are, I don't know.
Sure, Trustee DeRosa.
The sense I'm getting is that physically the capacity is there to expand it. We've been successful at recruiting teachers. Notionally we have, it seems to me, but that the demand is there. It seems to me that all of the elements are playing. I'm not sure how they interact, and maybe it requires some form of a takeaway from a different light. But it seems to me the elements are there to at least have a conversation over whether expanding is a a viable option, obviously subject to funding, subject to all the resources that, and all the implications and the logistics that go into contemplating that thing. So, from my perspective, I think the conversation is worth a while having, and the analysis worth pursuing until you come to a conclusion. Yes, we do, no, we don't. But we're not there yet. I don't think so, to make a decision one way or the other.
Trustee O'Brien, did that answer the question? Did you ask Trustee DeRosa? Trustee Agnew?
So I'm just trying to digest all the back, just the conversation. So what I'm hearing is that a couple of people have asked the question, right, is what are we looking to do to meet the demands that currently exist, right? We know we have to do something. There's been some questions around the expansion piece. We've heard about the HR strategy. We've heard about the capacity from a physical perspective. So we're kind of sitting here. I mean, are we looking for a report on what expanding looks like right now? Like when you say, we're not there yet, what's the criteria to determine if we're there yet? Because the demand is there. We see it in a wait list. The parents are asking for it. I'm just trying to figure out where we go from here. Do we just kind of sit here and see where this goes because we know it's there? I'm looking at a next step action.
Are you suggesting, Trustee, we get some sort of staff report on expansion?
Well, I'm trying to get a flavor for that, I think.
I can...
I agree, Trustee Agnew. I think it would be interesting to see, as an exercise, saying, if the goal is to meet demand, what does that look like? What is the program? Where is it? How is it structured? How much does it cost? Where's the money going to come from? If we have to rob Peter to pay Paul, what does that look like? Then we can kind of make a more informed decision. Because we know if we do what we're doing as we did last year, we're still going to be dealing with this a year from now, right? So I think that's a good strategy, yeah. I'd like to see that report.
Trustee DeRosa?
I'm just throwing this out for consideration, but maybe it's something that's referred to some form of a committee of the whole, or a number of people. We can refer it to committee for further consideration.
Superintendent?
Yep. Chair, and I think that I have, Andrea here probably has a much better memory than I do. All of this work has been done. It was done in 2017. It would be done to include this timeline right now that we're talking about, the expansion, the number of teachers required for expansion, the sites, et cetera. So certainly that is something that we can bring back to share. But the two ad hoc committees that the Board of Trustees formed at the time investigated all of this in a very fulsome way. So it's certainly not anything that we can't bring back and for discussion at any time. And just to be mindful of the fact that I know that often senior admin is viewed one way. We do spend time talking about expansion and meeting the demands and the needs of our parents and our students. So that information exists already, and we're happy to share it.
Trustee Agnew?
So through you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that, Superintendent Burkatson, and I actually was on one of those ad hoc committees, so I certainly know the amount of work that went in, the time and the process that it took to gather that information. And if that, I'm getting old, so 2 years ago, I probably won't recall the details of that, but I know that we did do a lot of work. We looked at staffing needs, we looked at physical expansion, what that looked like, what the demand looked like, was that EFI, was that early, what was that? So, and I'm always conscientious of not asking for us to recreate the wheel. I don't need staff reports to be done again. I know they're time consuming. If the flavor at the table is to get a little more information, and some of these trustees were not here or they were not involved at that time, is there an opportunity then perhaps to bring forward that information in some form and provide it to us, so at least we have something to discuss? Is that a good, viable solution?
Absolutely. It gives us a chance also to do a better presentation than we did 2 years ago. So we're happy to bring that forth. No problem.
Sorry. Trustee DeRosa?
Well, I think what I heard is we're going to dust off the report and try to consider whether any updating has to be done and maybe present it at the time. And that would be great.
Just a point of clarification, so we're looking at the expansion piece of the report pertaining to immersion. French immersion is what we're talking about here, that's where our wait lists lie, correct?
That's where... Trustee Carabella, Trustee Intomasi, are you there? Were you able to hear all of that? Okay. Okay, so were you able to hear what has been suggested? And I think there's agreement around the table. I just want to make sure you're both in agreement, which is to dust off the old report in regards to expansion, in regards to possibly eliminating some of the wait lists that we have in the program. Are we looking to... You have the floor. Thank you, Trustee Intomasi. Is there an appetite to have it brought back to policy and for us to deal with it as a group as opposed to creating an ad hoc committee? Back to policy. Trustee Carabella?
Thank you. I do want to say something.
Thank you, Trustee Carabella. I think just from hearing around the table, I think from all the trustees, there seems to be an appetite to try to expand this program if it's possible. So, that being said, we'll move off of that. We'll have a staff report for the next policy meeting in regards to, I guess, the report that's already existing in regards to expansion, and we'll review it here at the next policy meeting. I'm going to go back to the policy. Is there any other points, or can we move with the changes that have already been brought forward? Okay, Trustee O'Brien?
Once we move with the changes, this is through to Superintendent Baloff, does it not go back to the board for final vote? So once it leaves here, it's gone, correct?
So once it leaves our meeting this evening, you'll make the decision to add those changes, and then it is due for third reading at our next board meeting. And in the current policy, there is obviously requirements there around expansion. So subsequent to passing or not passing the policy, whatever the next steps are, we would continue that conversation of expansion at our next policy meeting by bringing back that report.
So it won't go to this board meeting, it'll go to the one after the next policy meeting, correct?
This here will go to the next board meeting, which is next Tuesday. Any changes based on the staff report will happen at the next policy, and whatever we decide to do with that will happen at the following board meeting, because it won't be a policy, but we'll discuss it here at policy. Janine?
You're going to third reading,
Next Tuesday.
so that means it's finished.
It's finished. Yeah.
I'm talking about the report right now.
Yes, but making any revisions to the policy, then...
Correct, is next Tuesday,
It
next,
would be better to make them...
Now.
Before you go to third reading.
So
but we're not looking to revise the policy. Right now, we're finishing whatever revisions are. The expansion piece is separate.
Right.
Is what I was saying. It's a separate piece. So the next policy meeting, we'll deal with the expansion piece, which we'll already have the framework of the policy done. Okay? We're good.
Do you disagree with that? No. That's what I understood as well.
Just, go ahead. So, if we do, if the board decides to expand, we could do that at the next policy meeting. That's my question.
So
Can it leaves tonight?
So the expansion piece isn't written in here. It just talks, this is the policy that talks about French as a whole. Expanding the program, it just gives us the parameters of expanding it. The expansion piece can be something separate. So it doesn't have to fall under this policy. Does that make sense? Because a motion can come up at any time, regardless if this policy is being edited or not, to expand the French program, or if Director Daly had made the decision on his own, he would come and present it. This policy is, whether it's in revision or not.
Okay, I hear you totally. It's just that there is an expansion component to the policy here.
If you want to propose any changes, now's your time to do it. That's what we're saying is, let's deal with whatever changes now. The expansion piece, it doesn't tie into this, right? Like, if we're going to expand it, unless you're changing parameters on how the program's run.
So if we're going to expand it, what you're saying is we have to expand it now.
No, we don't. No, if we pass the policy tonight, we bring it to the board next Tuesday, it passes. We talk about expansion next Tuesday, or the next policy meeting. We can bring a motion forward based on whatever the staff report is and how we want to move forward with it. If it means expanding it, not expanding it, doing something different. There's always that option to make a motion at the table.
Madam Chair.
Trustee Joy.
So, Madam Chair, question to Director Daly. Here it says French immersion from grade 1 in September, starts in grade 1. Looking at the public board, and they start in grade 2, that means you have that many free teachers, you have, the children are a little more mature in grade 2. So is that a particular reason why we chose grade 1 rather than grade 2, and is there any benefit to going to grade 2 just like the public board?
I think that's to Superintendent Perkaz.
Through you, Madam Chair, the students need to fulfill a certain number of hours by the end of grade 8, and we felt pedagogically that we wanted our students to be part of an English as well as a French program. The public board has gone to 100% French for grade 2 and 3, which is currently not a pedagogical model that we're interested in following.
To follow up, what's our percentage then in if public is 100% in grade 2 and 3, how much are we French and how much are we English right now?
No English, all French.
We are 100% too.
Pardon me, I thought you meant the public board.
No.
No, we are 50% of the day is French, the other is English.
Okay, is there any other recommendations for the policy? Okay, so can I get a motion? I'll find where it is now. Okay, so can I get a motion that the policy committee recommends that policy II-51, optional French programming, French immersion and extended French, be forwarded along with amendments to the November 19th, 2019 regular board meeting for approval at third meeting? Trustee Murphy. Can I get a seconder? Trustee Agnew? I'll take a recorded vote for this. Trustee O'Brien?
In favor.
Trustee Murphy?
In favor.
Trustee DeRosa?
In favor.
Trustee Duarte?
In favor.
Trustee Agnew?
In favor.
Trustee Carabella?
In favor.
Trustee Antosi?
In favor.
And just to clarify, we'll have a staff report at the next policy meeting and with the... Okay. So moving right along, maybe not right along, but moving along, To item 4.5, policy III-11, hiring and promotion policy, academic and non-academic personnel. So this is on page 90. So, because we don't have a presentation on this one, I'll start with the motion and the seconder, and then we can go through, open the floor to questions or any amendments. So can I get a motion that the policy committee recommends that policy III-11, hiring and promotion policy, academic and non-academic personnel be forwarded along with amendments to the November 19th, 2019 regular board meeting for approval? Trustee Murph?
Point of order. This policy was brought in the September policy meeting, and an amendment was made, and it's my understanding that amendment is still on the table.
So, we made an amendment, there was a motion, it wasn't voted on, because then there was a motion to defer, which then defeats the original motion, and it can be brought back to discuss now. Because we didn't make any other amendments, we decided to defer it based on further information.
So are you saying that the original amendment now is dead?
It just needs to come back as a new motion. Okay, so I've got, Trustee Murphy made the motion, can I have a seconder so we can open the floor for questions and discussions? Trustee Dewart, and any questions or comments? Okay, Trustee Dewart?
Through you, Madam Chair, the last time we discussed this policy, I did some groundwork, and I did speak to trustees, in many cases chairs and vice chairs of all the boards around us, Catholic and public. I have compiled a page worth of comments as I heard them from the concerned trustees. The names and phone numbers are presented, and I have distributed it to all the trustees concerned. I'm assuming I presented it in a non-partisan way, the way I heard it. It's up to each trustee to...
For you, Matt, point of order. I'm sorry, I cannot accept information being presented to the board that relates to other boards. We don't run our board according to other boards. We are Halton Baptist District School Board, and the decisions we make are the trust.
Trustee Antomasi, that's not a point of order. Trustee Dewart has the floor. He's making reference to information that he shared. It's not about whether you accept it or not is entirely up to you. He's making, I believe he has a point that he's trying to get to, so we're going to let Trustee Dewart finish.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The information provided is not to influence anybody, so I would say read it the way it's presented. It's not a board matter, we discussed everything around the board here, so thank you. In my conversations with various chairs and vice chairs, they presented how they select the SOs, senior staff, and in my discussion, which I have not documented here, I asked the question whether they have not taken the recommendation of a group of committee, whether they have not accepted that, and in no case have they refused the recommendation. So I just presented that. It's up to each trustee to accept it or not to accept it. That's my comment on this thing.
Okay, so is there any other comments in regards to the policy? Any amendments? Trustee O'Brien?
Thank you to you, Madam Chair. I'd like to direct trustee's attention to the fifth bullet, under requirements. I'll read it for you. This was the bullet that we talked about in the September meeting. I'll read it to you. It says, as it states now, I'm on e-scribe, so again, it's under principles, the fifth bullet. It does say the Director of Education is the sole employee of the elected Board of Trustees and reports directly to the Board. All authority of the Board to hire staff is delegated through the Director of Education. All other hiring decisions, including appointments to positions of responsibility, are operational matters and therefore are the responsibility of the director or designate. So that's what the policy presently says. I'm referring to the Education Act itself. I could quote you a few, but the one that stands out in my mind is on 171.1, where it says, "The board may appoint persons to supervise teaching staff, and every appointee shall hold the qualifications to perform the duties required under any act or regulation administered by the minister." I guess I look at it this way. I feel with anything that the more eyes on something, the better the outcome. The more cops on the beat, less crime. The more teachers on the playground, the better the behavior, and the more security guards at the concert, better the crowd. I feel if we did approve the hiring of superintendents, it would be better for the board. My experience in education, the years I've spent there, is the policies whatever policies we make are only as good as the people behind us that are carrying them out. And I've seen it carried out well, and I've seen it carried out not so well. So I would like to take that out and put something else in. But before I put my suggestion forward, I'd like to see what people just have to say about that.
Is there any comments to Trustee O'Brien's? Trustee O'Brien, do you want to put your recommendations forward?
Yes. I would like to recommend that in that fifth bullet, I'll read it again, the Director of Education is the sole employee of the elected Board of Trustees and reports directly to the Board. I would like to take out the word sole.
Is an employee of the elected Board of Trustees?
Yes. And then I would like to take out the rest of that bullet completely.
Sorry, so starting with all authority, those last two sentences removed completely?
Yes. And then I would like to put in another bullet. So is everybody following?
I think so, yep.
Because the word "sole" is out and the rest of the bullet is gone. And then I would like to put in this as a second bullet. The Board of Trustees, through a statutory hiring committee composed of 3 trustees, secretary, director, executive officer of human resources, and a senior staff member, perform the function of selecting candidates for supervisory officer, executive officer, and assistant chaplain. The final candidate in each hiring situation will be presented to the board for approval. Okay, I'll read that again slowly. The Board of Trustees, this is a separate bullet. The Board of Trustees, through a statutory hiring committee composed of 3 trustees, secretary, director, executive officer of human resources, and a senior staff member, perform the function of selecting candidates for supervisory officer, executive officer, and assistant chaplain. The final candidate in each hiring situation will be presented to the board for approval. Does anybody need me to read that again?
I've got the Board of Trustees through a statutory,
Okay, I will read it really.
Could you email it to me?
I can't, because I don't have it electronically.
Tomorrow, could you email it?
Can I read it again? I'll do it really slowly, because I want you to... The Board of Trustees, through a statutory hiring committee composed of 3 trustees, secretary-director, executive officer of human resources, and a senior staff member, perform the function of selecting candidates for supervisory officer, executive officer, and system chaplain. the final candidate in each hiring situation will be presented to the board for approval.
Do we have any questions about that? Trustee Murphy?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Trustee O'Brien. So, we have a statutory hiring committee, and then it's being approved by the board. That seems, to me, in my opinion, that's a bit of redundancy. And will that slow down the process and gum up the system is a concern that I would have. I understand the statutory hiring committee. I'm just questioning the need for it to come back for approval to the board.
Trustee O'Brien?
My response to that is, will be only 3 trustees on the hiring committee. I feel something that this is important, that all trustees should have a say in, and only through approval will that happen. I don't think, I may be slow, but we do not hire superintendents that often. It's a very rare thing. I think it's worth a slower process, and I think we would get the very best results. The results we have now are good, but again, I'm looking for better.
Trustee Agnew?
So just for I don't want to say point of clarification, because I'll get in trouble for saying point. So just for clarification, when you say presented for approval to the Board of Trustees, is that through an action? So we have the committee, they have the interviews, they do that piece, and then what's that second piece? Through an action item? Is that the process?
Yes, that is through an action item.
Okay.
Trustee DeRosa, and then Secretary.
Can you go through the other amendments that you recommended on that paragraph? I understand what the changes you want to make, but I'd like to hear the other amendments, if you don't mind.
No, bullet number 5, I would take out the word "sole" in the first sentence.
And then all the rest of the sentence?
The rest of the other 2 sentences are out.
2 sentences I would delete.
And then, and the addition of a new bullet.
Addition of a new bullet.
Do you need it to be reread again, Trustee DeRosa?
Yes, please.
Oh, sorry. The entire thing, thank you to you, Madam Chair, the entire thing would read as this, with the 5th bullet completely taken out. The Director of Education is the sole employee of the elected Board of Trustees and reports directly to the Board. The Director of Education is the employee of the elected Board of Trustees and reports directly to the Board. The Board of Trustees, through a statutory hiring committee composed of 3 trustees, Secretary, Director, Executive Officer of Human Resources, and a senior staff member, perform the function of selecting candidates for Supervisory Officer, Executive Officer, and Assistant Chaplain. The final candidate in each hiring situation will be presented to the Board for approval.
Thank you, Trustee O'Brien. Trustee Agnew?
Madam Chair, I have a question on the 3 trustees. How is that determined? Because the other things I've seen have been sort of chair/vice chair, so we're suggesting 3 here. So, what does that look like? How is that selected? How is that chosen? Is that something that needs to be addressed as part of your suggestion? I'm just wondering how we handle it.
Thank you to you, Madam Chair.
Trustee O'Brien.
That's an excellent question. I personally would like to see it rotated, as opposed to being the chair and the vice chair. I believe I'm really open to that one. So, myself, I would like to see it continually rotated through, but,
Director Daley, did you have a...
Sorry, a couple of questions. So, because one of my duties is when the board takes an action is to make sure it's an action they can take and that it does align with the Education Act. So when you've inserted the term a statutory committee, what do you mean by statutory?
Statutory, you're making reference that statutory might need to be removed because statutory committee would be one that would be mandated through the Education Act.
Okay, I thought that would link it to the Education Act, the word statutory.
I guess my follow-up question would be, where in the Education Act does it designate a statutory committee to hire superintendents?
Okay, is there any other comments in regards to Trustee O'Brien's suggestions?
Mr. Chair?
For you?
Yeah, sorry, okay, so I've got Trustee Carabella and then Trustee Antomasi. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it gets brought in camera and then it goes to the board meeting once it's passed. It gets recorded in the regular board meeting. So it does go, Trustee Antomasi. And I think that's already the policy in regards to hiring practices, is it goes in camera first and then it goes to the regular board meeting. Trustee Carabella, did you have your questions answered? Is there any other comments to Trustee O'Brien's revisions? Okay, sorry, I've got Secretary Daley over here, and I believe I've got Superintendent O'Hara as well.
Yeah, I'd say it's a question more than a comment. You referenced this part of the Education Act in your preface. Can you just repeat that?
Yes. 171. Point 5.
And you're referencing that to demonstrate...
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm referencing that to demonstrate the fact that we are able to, we do have, as a group, the right to make this choice tonight.
Just for a point of clarification, it's not actually in the motion. I think he just used that to preface his changes.
Correct, that is not in the motion.
Trustee O'Hara, oh, sorry, did you have something further, Superintendent?
I guess I would just want to caution trustees on making decisions on an interpretation of the Education Act that may or may not be accurate.
Trustee O'Hara? Superintendent O'Hara. It's okay, I called Director Daley, Superintendent
Thank you.
Daley as well.
Through you. It's just a comment on the system chaplain piece. Chaplains need to be approved by the Chancery Office. Our normal practice has been to involve, usually it would be the Dean of Halton in that selection of a chaplain, and that would be the same for a system chaplain. So the way that motion seems to be put forward, I just want to go and make sure that we're not going to run into a challenge in that we would normally involve, someone who's representing the bishop in the selection of that, because ultimately it does need to get some approval from the Chancery Office for a system chaplain or a chaplain. Now again, if you're promoting a chaplain who's already been approved, and it works for us, you're okay, but if it's coming from someone from the outside, we do need the bishop's approval. Thank you.
Sorry, Trustee Dort, I have do you have a follow-up for that? I have a follow-up too. Okay, go.
To Madam Chair, question to Superintendent O'Hare. Do we have a procedure or policy for selection of policy or procedure, or it's just something that it's in our head?
We don't have listed out, as we would in procedure 628, anything on chaplain. Again, we've got a long-standing practice with that. That's what I can speak to, and so I don't want us to pass a motion and then, create an issue. We really have always gone and involved, usually the dean of Halton, but it could be someone, another priest, parish priest, in the selection of a chaplain for our board.
Trustee O'Brien, does this have a follow-up to this? Because I have a follow-up question to what's being asked right now.
It does.
Okay, Trustee O'Brien.
Through you, Madam Chair, to Superintendent Harrell, when the bishop does appoint someone or
Approve our
someone,
selection, yes.
does the bishop approve more than one person?
Again, through the chair, we would go and put forward our name before we would bring it forward to the Board of Trustees. So we bring forward a name, and then we get confirmation from the Chancery Office that that person's acceptable. And we have had times when there was a concern expressed.
Can I just ask a follow-up question? Sorry, Trustee O'Brien. So, just to be clear though, Superintendent O'Hara, is the supervisory staff though actually has a candidate that it brings forward. It's not that the bishop's office says, this is who you need to hire. It's done here first, then you bring it for approval, then you report back to the board.
That's right. And assuming that the bishop is comfortable with that appointment, then we bring it forward. If not, then we have a conversation as to whether we need to go with candidate B.
So having a trustee on that board, how does that stop that process?
No, I'm not saying it stops the process. I think the way I read the motion, it's limiting who's actually on the selection committee, and I'm saying you're missing someone. So that's where, maybe that is better in procedure in terms of who would actually make up that particular selection process.
Trustee O'Brien?
I don't see how it limits this in this motion, because it would be Human Resources with 3 trustees would still select the system chaplain. That would come to the board for approval, and then it would go to the bishop. That's what I see. That's how I envision this.
Is there any, sorry.
Okay. Maybe I'm not being clear. On the selection committee, we would normally go and have the dean of Halton or a parish priest from Halton, and all of those, and then we would report back to the Chancery Office that this is the individual that we're recommending.
Sorry, so just for clarification, you would normally, does that mean it's actually a consistent practice, or it's just something that you...
No, that's been the
So, in procedure? Because you're making reference to putting it into procedure, but if it's not already in procedure, I'm not sure...
No, and again, that has been our practice. It certainly, again, in my opinion, certainly assists in terms of informing the Chancery Office around the caliber of the individual that we're putting forward.
Thank you. Thank you. Trustee O'Brien?
I don't want to interfere with this process. I could take out chaplain. I'd be willing to do that. far be it from me to disagree with the bishop, so I'm willing to take that out. I didn't know about this, so, shall we,
Okay, so is there any other questions in regards to trustee O'Brien's recommendations? Because if there isn't, we'll move forward. Sorry, Andrea, you've got...
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I wanted to ask trustee O'Brien, your removal of the word "sole," what was the rationale for that?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. The first policy meeting we had, Liz, Dr. Daly pointed that out. As long as the word "sole" is in there, that limits, the word "sole" implies that trustees solely hire the director, or they solely are involved in the hiring process of the director, with no other influence in any other hiring at all. So that would be the stumbling block to this policy, as I recall.
Sorry, just to follow up, this is true, I think that's true, Director Daly's comments. I also think that that word is in there for a reason. We've taken it directly from, and this was drafted years ago, and legal had input in it. Do you remember, and I know that the Education Act can be quite confusing the way it's written, because it refers interchangeably to the board, as the Board of Trustees and also the corporate board, so sometimes it kind of like the lines get muddied a little bit. But if you remember that good governance document that you received from OCSTA, that purple document that you got in hard copy from me as well, on page 16 it actually quotes directly, it has an interpretation, and I think it's the interpretation we should all follow, because this was directly created, developed by all trustee associations, both French and English Catholic and English public and French public. So it says the Director of Education is the Chief Executive Officer, and the Chief Education Officer of the school board, and acts as the Secretary of the board. The Director is the sole employee who reports directly to the Board of Trustees. So it's directly verbatim from that document, page 16, if you wanted to have a look at it. On that same page, it talks about school board responsibilities, and the first bullet says, and I can bring you my copy if you don't have yours here, says hiring and performance appraisal, because these are the responsibilities of the school board. So it goes into hiring and performance appraisal of the director, having a vision statement, and developing and being accountable. It also says managing, so leaving the, I'm trying to find the actual, hiring and performance appraisal of the Director of Education, period. It does not say hiring for superintendents, hiring for any other. So this, I think if you're going to look at an interpretation of the Education Act, I think the starting point should be this good governance document, because they've had legal teams look at it, and it's been created for trustees to help make it a little bit more easy to understand. That's just my input.
I'll respond to that. Thank you so much.
Trustee O'Brien. And then I'm gonna, once you're done after this, unless there's any other questions or different comments, I think we should just decide whether or not we're adding this or not.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I hear what you're saying. I read the good governance document. In our governance session, I did ask the governance person we had here who the board is, because that's what it comes down to. And I said, is it the 9 people around this table? And she said, yes, it is. So every time I see the word board, to me, it's not muddy, it's clear. We are the board, and the board are the 9 people that sit around this table. So that's what, I'm just taking it right from the person that spoke to us, so that's what I'm taking mine from.
And Trustee O'Brien, I was at that session too, and she also did talk about how confusing it is the way it is portrayed in the Act, because the Education Act also says that the board delivers program, and yet the trustees aren't actually delivering the program to students, right? So that's talking about the board, the corporate board, not Board of Trustees, so.
Okay, so we're gonna move along. So if there's any other comments about, sorry, Director.
Well, I think I do need to make a couple of other comments. So, first of all, I don't believe anywhere it's listed in the Education Act that it's listed as a duty of a trustee to hire supervisory officers. I don't believe it's listed as a statutory obligation. I don't believe it's listed as a duty and responsibility. I did forward to trustees the recommendation from the ministry around leading hiring practices that was based on operational reviews that were done over a 4 or 5 year period, including the operational review that was done of this board. I'm just offering that as
So, sorry, Trustee O'Brien has some changes on the table. Appreciate the feedback, and I think the trustees need to make a decision in regards to whether or not we agree to these changes that have been brought forward. Do you have anything new to add, Trustee O'Brien?
I just want to respond to what Dr. Daly said. I did read the road ahead. The road ahead does reference Bill 177 quite a bit. And I spent a lot of time going through Bill 177, and not one place does it say that trustees only hire the director. And if you can show me in Bill 177 where it says that, I would be more than enlightened. But if you want to show it to me, I would believe it. But to me, the document you gave us quotes this law, and I don't see anywhere in that law where it says that.
Yeah, the document that I provided was the one that was given to school boards around operational matters and advice given by the ministry. That's why I presented it to you. I think it really comes down to the difference between potentially what you think you can do and what you should do.
Sorry, do you have something new, Trustee Duart?
Yeah, just the last point here. I talked to six different boards. I did my research, and out of 6 boards, 5 different boards bring it as an action item to the Board of Trustees, whereas one board, the public board, Halton District School Board, brings it as an information item.
Thank you, Trustee Duart. Okay, Barry. Sorry, do you have anything further to add to it?
Just that I also did my research and sent it out to trustees. I do agree to a certain extent with what Trustee Antomasi said. We should be deciding what we want to do as a board. Out of the 29 Catholic boards, very few of them have this kind of specificity in their policy. Most of them use practice. The information I gave you, I'm assuming done.
So I'm going to call it. It's 9:15 and we still have lots of other items to go on here. I appreciate the feedback. Is there any other, do you have anything else you wanted to add, Trustee O'Brien? Sorry, Trustee Agnew.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair. So, are you rewording it then? Like we had a conversation about chaplain, and so just for clarification, I just want to understand, so, I just want to sort of understand some of the sticking points around the table as they're being, is the sticking point around the creation of the committee? Is the sticking point around the coming for an action item? Like, I just want to sort of understand, a little bit around, if that makes sense.
So what I thought I heard when we first talked about this, notwithstanding Trustee O'Brien's suggestions, was that when looking at the procedure, it appeared that one trustee or possibly 2 trustees were involved in the hiring committee, i.e. in the interview process. Didn't seem to me, my understanding wasn't so much around whether it was an action item or not, it was the ability to be on the interview panel. And in both the kind of the research, for lack of a better word, that Trustee Duarte did and that I did, in most of the boards, there's 1 or 2 or 3. I think that was the max size, well, other than my former board, but they don't have it in a procedure or a policy. How many people do sit in on the interview? So certainly, if the concern was only one person was on the interview panel, and it seemed to be, it was always going to be the chair or the vice chair, and I don't mean this current chair or vice chair, I mean theoretically, because that's the practice we've followed in the past. We've certainly included in the procedure the ability to open that up to 3 trustees to provide advice to sit in on the interview panel. My concern, quite honestly, is giving the final determination to trustees around hiring other than the Director of Education can open up a host of problems for the board.
I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
You're the only we have the role to
Do you have, Trustee O'Brien, do you have anything new? Because we really need to move on from this. We're kind of circling on the same stuff.
In closing, and then we can vote, I would say that you are the trustees, you make the decision that's best for the students that you have. If you think us approving it will filter down to the classroom to make better teaching moments, then I say, please vote with this. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay, so just to clarify though, Trustee O'Brien, are you taking out the assistant chaplain? Okay. Janine, are you good with that? Okay, Janine, can you read the motion if you don't mind? Not the motion.
The amendment is to remove the word "sole." The Director of Education is the employee of the elected Board of Trustees and reports directly to the Board. And the new bullet would read, the Board of Trustees, through a hiring committee composed of 3 trustees, the Secretary/Director, Executive Officer of Human Resources, and a senior staff member, perform the function of selecting the candidate for Supervisory Officer and Executive Officer. The final candidate in the hiring situation will be presented to the Board for approval in camera.
Okay. So, do we have a consensus, or are we in agreement to make these changes? Want to do a recorded vote? Okay, Trustee O'Brien.
In favor.
Trustee Murphy.
Opposed?
Trustee DeRosa.
Opposed.
Trustee Duarte.
In favor.
Trustee Agnew.
In favor.
Trustee Ian Tomasi.
in favor.
Trustee Carabella.
In favor.
So that is 2 opposed, 5 in favor. So we'll make the amendments to add that into the policy. Is there any other changes noted to the policy? Okay. So can we have a recorded vote on the amended changes to the policy? We had, I believe, Trustee Murphy made the motion, and it was seconded by Trustee Duarte. All in favor of presenting this policy at the next board meeting? A recorded vote again. Okay. Trustee O'Brien?
In favor.
Trustee Murphy?
In favor.
Trustee DeRosa?
In favor.
Trustee Duarte?
In favor.
Trustee Agnew?
In favor.
Trustee Antomas?
In favor.
Trustee Carabella?
In favor.
Policy passes. So we'll go back to the regular items. We'll go back to 4.1, Policy II-10, releasing pupils from school. It's on page, it starts on page 7. I apologize for the jumping back and forth. So we're gonna move to, policy II-10, releasing pupils from school. Can I have a motion that the policy committee recommends I-10, releasing students from school, be forwarded along with amendments to the November 19th, 2019 regular board meeting for approval? Trustee Duarte? Trustee O'Brien?
Find the action report for releasing students from school. The policy was last revised 16. Staff have reviewed the policy, have made very minor amendments to the policy. Associated policies and procedures were added. The Children's Law Reform Act was also added in the reference section, and the date was removed from the Progressive Discipline and Safety in Schools title when that policy was actually revised, and now it's reflected accordingly in our current policy. The revised policy is attached for review and consideration by the committee.
Any questions? As Superintendent Bowell mentioned, there's really, it's a stale date and one reference added in. Okay. Trustee O'Brien?
Yes. Thank you, through Madam Chair. To Director Daly. It says, a parent can a parent use email to sign out a student?
Sorry, are you asking that, or are you saying it says?
No, I'm asking that. Can they do it from a distance?
I don't believe parents sign out via email. They would sign out through school messenger. So can it be done electronically? Yes. Typically, that's how students would be, or not typically, but students can be signed out virtually.
It does say that, okay, there is one bullet that says this: where the principal believes that a student, parent, guardian is making unjustifiable use of the privilege of being excused from school, the principal shall notify the student, parent, guardian where appropriate, and if necessary, the school superintendent. That's under requirements, bullet 3. So it does say that, if it's being abused. I have had 2 people come to me, and just to put it out, and they have said that on days of school mass at high schools, there's an unusual large number of sign-outs. Is there any way that we can track that? Or is there any response to that?
If I have a response to it, I guess I would have a question maybe rather than a response.
So, meaning that you don't think it's happening? Like, I just don't...
I didn't say I didn't think it was happening. I said I don't have a response to it. My question would be to track it would be to what end?
I guess to raise awareness. I'm just bringing it to the board. I mean, 2 people came to me, 2 ratepayers. They just noticed it. I wonder if anybody else has noticed that. But it is on school mass days. The sign out electronically from a distance seems to be higher.
Through you, Madam Chair, I would say that the school principal would, or vice principal, the admin team would be aware of what the absenteeism is on that day, and if you are an administrator and you see it as a chronic issue, if it's a student in particular, there are lots of pieces there, then you would address it accordingly at the school level, and that may include reaching out, contacting a parent, etc.
Thank you.
Barring no other questions, we'll go to a recorded vote. Trustee Agnew? Trustee Duarte?
In favor.
Trustee DeRosa?
Abstain, I was not in the room, so.
Trustee Murphy?
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien?
In favor.
Trustee Intomasi?
In favor.
Trustee Carabella?
In favor.
Policy goes to the next board meeting. That moves us along to policy 4.2, II-1. Can I get a mover that the policy committee recommends that policy II-19, educational field trips, be forwarded along with amendments to the November 19th, 29 regular board meeting for approval? Trustee O'Brien, by Trustee Agnew. Discussion? Oh, sorry. I'm not going to do that. Actually, I'm going to hand it over to Superintendent Crowell or Superintendent Bala.
And through you, Madam Chair, please find attached the action report. The field trip policy was last revised again in January of 2016, so fairly recently. Staff have reviewed the policy, have made, again, very minor amendments. Associated policies and procedures were updated, so we've included the progressive discipline policy and procedure because they are referenced in the body of the document. A reference was added, and minor edits were made throughout for clarity. The revised policy is attached for review and consideration by the policy committee.
Trustee Agnew.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So I just have a question around, and I'm looking to everyone for their conversation, but I just have a question around the requirements for accessibility in field trips. I know that when we talk about this, I know we try to take them into consideration, but I also know that there are field trips that are planned and executed that are not accessible, and we try really hard to try to find ways to make those accessible, and at the end of the day, they're not. And so I'm wondering if there's a way for us to put actual requirements in there that any of the approved field trips are actually researched and deemed to be fully accessible for those students, so they can participate. So just opening it up for conversation.
Trustee O'Brien?
Thank you to you, Madam Chair. So Trustee Agnew, would you possibly be opening to a clause in here, possibly under principles, that would say all trips should be accessible to all students? Because I'd be open to that.
Through you, Madam Chair. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know, I'm looking at where it could possibly go. Could it go into requirements? I don't know what that exact wording would look like. But I'd like to see that as a requirement, that all educational field trips be fully accessible.
Trustee Agnew, can I suggest, would this be something that SEAC could give feedback into? Because I know it's come up a couple times in regards to accessibility. I know I've heard it through the grapevine in regards to field trips and what the requirements are. If it would be something that it would be beneficial for us to maybe say, let's have feedback weigh into SEAC feed into it, and then we bring it back to this policy to ensure that those are some of the key points and maybe what it should look like, and make some suggestions.
Yeah, I mean, we could, we can go that route, or we could possibly make some suggested changes and then bring it to SEAC to take a look at. I don't know the best order for that, if it would be to go to them to elicit their feedback, or if it would be, listen, here's some changes that are suggested from an accessibility perspective, and then take it back to SEAC to see if they're in agreement with that. I don't know that ideal piece. I would just like to see something reflected in there, if we can.
Superintendent Powell?
Sure, through you, Madam Chair. I would suggest that this is a working document, so I like your idea. We can come up with some language, do a little research. I can consult with Superintendent Cipriano's team and come up with some ideal language, and then we can bring the policy meeting and review it again at that time. Okay.
Through you, Madam Chair. When you, what would you mean, and I don't want to...
AODA.
By accessible,
well,
everybody can participate in...
Equally. So can I give you an example?
Yeah.
Is that helpful?
Yeah.
So a couple, so I can give you a couple, but one might be a situation where there's a ski trip that is scheduled for a school, and you may have a child that has mobility issues that wouldn't be able to fully participate in that. Or if we look at things like, it's tough, we look at things like Kelso or RBG as an example, and their paths, but when you really, they're not fully accessible. So I would say, it's a tough one, but those are some examples of, we go, we take them, we hope that they're going to be, and then what ends up happening is that we try to make it work for that particular student, but at the end of the day, they're not getting that full experience from that trip, as I think we intend that to be. So that would be an example. So what that wording looks like, I don't know. I would welcome to see what staff thinks about that, but that's my general thought behind it. Okay.
Trustee Dort?
To you, Madam Chair. Another example to Director Daly is, I did receive a comment from one of the parents at Garden Angel School about the school going for a trip to Camp Tanamakoon, and apparently there's some distance to be walked. Apparently there's some, it's not very accessible for children with special needs. So this is what I heard. I've never been to that camp, but I'm sure there's some merit to what I said.
Through you, Madam Chair, what I can offer is that we have had some discussion around accessibility already as a senior team, and certainly had some discussion about thinking about the locations. And Camp Tanamakoon, you know, is a wonderful camp, but it's certainly something that has come up in a few of our camps in particular, and needing to take a barge and just getting to the site. So we've talked about that, and I think it's timely to have that ongoing conversation.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, so, oh, sorry, go, Trustee O'Brien.
Oh, co-instructional, what does that mean?
So I think it means that not necessarily it's only found in the curriculum, but it's found in some of the supporting, let's say, learning skills that students might experience, some of the team building, some of the other things we want them to learn besides what's only in the ministry curriculum documents.
So, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering about this. I mean, I believe our teachers put a lot of work into that instructional moment, a lot of work into planning. And if we did even a financial cost of how much money goes into even putting together the instructional day, it's a lot of money. And I notice a lot of our trips do happen during the instructional part of the day. So I'm wondering, the bullet says the experience shall have a curricular and/or co-instructional relevance for the group of students covered. I really wonder if we should take out the word "or," so that all these experiences do have some kind of, are related somehow to curriculum.
Trustee Agnew?
So I just wonder if I could just give a thought to that, Trustee O'Brien, through you, Madam Chair. I think I understand where the wording from that, like why it is like that, and there are also trips that I know staff plans for things like to bond the intermediates, to sort of bring them together. So while I 100% appreciate that we need to really take a look at that curriculum piece, there are just truly some trips that are designed for them just to bond, and the grade 8 trips or the rite of passage. That so I would just be cautious that, I mean, at the end of the day, if they go to the Toronto Blue Jay game, could we find a way to work in some sort of mathematic lesson? We probably could, but can we just allow them to go and just participate in that as? So I'd be fearful to make that specific, and then if it's not an actual instructional curriculum-based trip, our staff then not adhering to that policy, if that makes sense.
Trustee O'Brien.
Thank you, to Madam Chair, to Superintendent Kroll. Are there not a lot of things in curriculum that have to do with rite of passage, bonding? I mean, could they not be found?
You're testing my curriculum knowledge here a little bit. What I would say, though, is there's more than just the ministry curriculum. So if you look at our Catholic graduate expectations, there's also things that we would say are important and core foundational documents for us as a Catholic board. There's certainly things you would find in that document that definitely lend themselves to the type of trips that Trustee Agnew is talking about.
Thank you, but I guess as a teacher to me, I still would like to see the "or" taken out of there. I just feel a lot of money and efforts put into teachers planning and instructing, so I would like to see it taken out.
Okay, so do we have any other, Trustee Dorr, do you have any in regards to Trustee O'Brien's comment?
Madam Chair, question to Trustee O'Brien, or rather question to Superintendent. Does everything in the curriculum, or does everything, or does all the information that we impart on students have a curricular and a co-instructional value? Whatever we do in a school day or school week, school month, school year.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think you know the answer to the question you're asking, right? So,
if you take the word "or" out, it means that it has to have both.
Yeah, but it's not,
So,
but not all of them.
But not all of them have.
Okay, so Trustee O'Brien has has made a suggestion to a change. How do we have any, do we want to do like a vote in regards to whether or not so Trustee O'Brien?
In favor.
Trustee Murphy?
Opposed.
Trustee DeRosa?
Opposed.
Trustee Duarte?
Opposed.
Trustee Agnew?
Opposed.
Trustee Antomas? Trustee Antomasi? Are you? Trustee Carabella? So the change fails, so, do you need me to give you the number on that, Janine, or you're good? Okay. Okay, any other, so we're gonna defer this to the next policy meeting, and staff will come back with some recommendations in regards to accessibility. Okay, excellent. Thank you. So moving on to item 4.4, we're jumping to page 43 of our package. So, read the motion. Can I get somebody to move that the policy committee recommends that policy II-53, exemption from instruction in the Family Life Program Fully Alive, related to the human development and sexual health expectations in Ontario curriculum, health and physical education, grades 1 to 8, 2019, be forwarded to the November 19th regular board meeting for approval at second and third reading. Trustee Agnew, seconded by Trustee Duarte. Superintendent Percassin, is there any further feedback in regards to this?
Nothing further, just the stakeholder input that's provided for you in Appendix A.
Do we have any questions in regards to this policy or the stakeholder feedback? No? Okay, so we'll go to a recorded vote. Trustee Agnew?
In favor?
Trustee Duarte?
In favor.
Trustee DeRosa?
In favor.
Trustee Murphy?
In favor.
Trustee O'Brien?
In favor.
Trustee Antomasi?
Sorry, I just got back on, I was cut off. Can you please repeat me?
We're on item 4.4, policy II-53. We're voting on the exemption from instruction related to the human development and sexual health expectations. This is for second and third reading. Are you in favor? Thank you. Trustee Carabella? Okay, thank you. So the motion will be forwarded on to the next board meeting. Now we're moving to item 5.1, school uniform, I'm in the right spot, right? Okay, school uniform dress code, school dress code community consultation and plan, and I'm assuming, and I'm gonna say his name wrong again, see? Is it Dan, are you speaking to this, or is it Superintendent Crow? You're gonna start? Okay, the floor is yours.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm pleased to present information report that was on the public consultation plan for school uniforms that the policy committee requested. If you move to the sort of second page of text, so part one, the purpose of the consultation is tied to the RFP process. So as we've discussed at previous meetings, the RFP process needs to be started by the spring of 2020, and it has to be completed and the vendor awarded by the end of June 2020, as our current contract with ISW ends at December 31st, 2020. So the consultation piece, before moving ahead with the RFP process, HCDSB staff and trustees are seeking input from parents, students, and staff on the requisite characteristics of an ideal school uniform provider. So the goal is to gather feedback from our stakeholders that will guide the development of the RFP in accordance with our policies on purchasing and our school uniform dress code and school dress code. So worked with Andrea in strategic communications to kind of identify who we're targeting in terms of getting information. And you'll see on page 3 the different stakeholders and how we're planning on engaging them. And then on page 4, you'll see the different ways in which we are intending to reach out to those stakeholders. So some of it will be just information shared out through email. We will reach out to Catholic School Councils, to CPIC, to SEAC to get their input. We will have 2 public consultation meetings, one in North Milton, Halton Hills area, and one in North Oakville. And Andrea can talk a little bit more what those sessions might look like. Did you want to take a minute to?
Sure. So the last time we went out for public consultation regarding school uniform, it was more of an open-ended, and I don't know, I know Superintendent Ballo was there because she was there as a school principal. She actually hosted at St. Peter's, and she was also served as a facilitator. So what we did at that point is, because the trustees were looking at a couple of different items, in general, we had what they call a World Cafe, where they tables set up, and we had different discussion questions for each table, and we had the facilitator just jot down every single comment that everybody made, and we posted every single comment as part of the board report after the fact. We did I think we had over 100 people attend at that point. I expect with this one we may, if we're looking at 2 consultations, and we thought maybe one in North Milton or Georgetown and one in North Oakville, just so that we are making it accessible for as many of our parents as possible. I think we're going to get quite a good turnout. We discussed maybe instead of the roundtable discussion, because what tends to happen in those type of consultations, as much as you try to have everybody, because they always have the option of passing, and what happens is at those tables you'll get some people who are a little bit more vocal than others, and as soon as they speak, then the more reserved parents may decide, well, you know what, my opinion kind of differs, so they say nothing or they agree. So we want to be able to give every parent an opportunity to share their opinion freely and anonymously if they want to. So we've talked about, and we did this for our strategic plan. It's a form of consultation called card storming. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, probably took part in it for our last strategic planning consultation. So it provides a little bit more anonymity. People can put down their thoughts on Post-it notes. They don't have to identify who they are. And then what we do is we let the group actually develop themes from the thoughts, so it actually helps build consensus in the group. And it's not left to, staff to kind of figure out what were they trying to say here. They're actually telling you, they're putting them into themes, and I think it's a much better way to gather, more inclusive, better way to gather feedback. That's what we talked about anyway, but we're open to your comments and suggestions as well.
Thank you. So we'll start with, is that?
I was just going to say, so we have Dan Tekalik, our purchasing manager, here. You can talk again about the RFP if there's any questions, and then Andrew and I can happily answer any questions you might have about the consultation plan.
Okay. Did you have anything to add right now, or are you just going to wait for some questions?
If I may, Madam, through you, Madam Chair, just want to make one comment on this. I know we're sort of directed at looking at the uniform provider and trying to find an ideal school uniform provider, but part of that is also trying to find out what the ideal school uniform program would look like. Because there may be elements in the school uniform program that won't allow for an ideal uniform provider. So they sort of go hand in hand. If there's a group of parents or a community that's not satisfied with the uniform program itself, then clearly they won't be pleased with the uniform provider that's selected. So you will get those complaints, and a lot of times with the last time we sort of went out with this, we sort of had it open-ended, but it just became either I don't like uniforms or I don't like the uniform provider. So, if we're going to go out and canvass the community or ask questions or ask for feedback, I think we sort of need to direct them in a direction where we're actually going to get feedback that makes sense and feedback that is actually addressing the program itself. Because, as I said, you can't sort of have one without the other. And that's one thing I think that we need to sort of put out on the table to ensure that, in fact, we have a uniform program that everybody can live with.
So it sounds like you're saying is if we're asking the question of people who don't want a uniform, it's going to be negative no matter what. So we have to take that into consideration.
Right. So, so there's got to be a way to, I don't know what the word is, to filter that. Because as I said, you're just not gonna have anybody satisfied with the uniform provider if they're not happy with the program itself.
Makes sense. Sorry, Superintendent Crowell?
And just one further addition, Andrew and I, we spent a lot of time talking about what is it we want to gather information on. The policy that's sort of behind this around school uniform isn't up for review till 2021, 2022, or sorry, 2020, 2021, so it's not, we don't want to open a discussion around a policy that we're not looking to change, that's not up for review. So that's why we're trying to make sure that we're focused on what's imminent, and what's imminent right now is the RFP. And so by focusing the conversation on the RFP, we're hoping we can get the best process forward for the RFP to get the best possible vendor for our parents that meets the most needs that we have.
Makes sense. Trustee Duarte?
Through you, Madam Chair, just a quick update from Superintendent Crowell. How many schools right now, after September, school councils meet and decide to have the vote, how many schools are going for uniform, and how many are balanced in our system?
I think it's 31 off the top of my head. It's in the low 30s.
31 with uniform?
31 to 35.
Out of 45 or 46?
Correct. Yeah, plus all of our secondary schools.
Just a follow-up question. Since we have 31 schools, and most of the schools are with uniforms are located in Milton, Burlington, Oakville, this area, what is the sense of doing a public consultation in Halton Hills? Because none of them have uniforms, so why do we even bother to go there and do public consultation when they do not have uniforms? Does it make sense?
I was expecting Janet to be here, so expecting her to try and twist my arm at getting us to go up to Halton Hills. All kidding aside, that was one of the things that we talked about, either having it in North Milton or having it at a Georgetown school, so that we do want to get the Halton Hills group. We were trying to find the balances for population, right? We have such a high population in Milton. We were thinking if we had it at our northernmost Milton school, that might still attract those Georgetown parents.
Sorry, I didn't ask the question right. So we are focusing right now on the RFP process, right? So right now, most of the schools in Georgetown do not have uniforms, but we are planning a public consultation in Halton Hills. Does it make sense to have it there, or does it have sense to have it in a place where we already have uniforms? Place like Milton, Oakville, Burlington.
That the high school still have. Christ the King still has it, so I think that's what he was saying, is they'll do it in North Milton.
One school.
But that's why he's saying North Milton. Right, North Milton, just in case they can get some of them. Trustee O'Brien and then Trustee DeRosa.
Question to Superintendent Crowell. I know the focus is the RFP, but will somewhere we get some information about why some schools consistently say no?
I think, as Dan said, you're going to get some of that information come through anyway. I just would caution, a conversation about a policy that's not up for review, because I think that sets us up, right, for something that's already in policy. It was last passed in February 2018, so it's not even a year, just over a year old.
Trustee DeRosa?
Am I to understand correctly that not all schools have a uniform policy?
All schools have a uniform policy. Some of it looks like a dress code. So for schools that don't have a school uniform, they will have a school dress code. Does that make sense?
So, we have a board-wide uniform policy that everybody's supposed to adhere to, right?
If they have, only if that school has agreed to go with a uniform. The board policy is blanket, but each school has decided whether or not, that's correct. And out of that, 31 to 35 schools participate in a school uniform.
Right.
Which then fall under the policy.
So it's a board-wide policy, but we give them the option to opt out. Different way of saying things.
Opt in.
Opt in. Oh, opt in. So how many have opted in?
31 out of 35, 31 to 35 out of 45.
Oh, okay. So, I'm just raising the question, should we really be questioning the opt-in option?
Well, I think that's what Superintendent Crowell was saying, is right now we're focusing on the RFP process because that's what we're dealing with right now, and we have to get that dealt with. The policy's up for review next year. It's something I think we can discuss, but I don't think that right now is the time, because that's a
Right.
whole other review. Trustee Murphy is next, and then trustee...
Because there's nothing worse than, the implementation of standard policy, that you allow exceptions to. It just,
So currently, the way the policy is right now, it's up for review next school year, so this February. Oh, well, there you go. In February, we can talk about it.
just raising a point, that's all. Thank you.
Just a point of clarification, so the policy is called School Uniform Dress Code, School Dress Code, because every school has to have a school dress code. Some schools' dress code may be a uniform, and some may not, and there's still guiding principles there around your decorum in terms of dress to attend school. And so that's why it's the same overarching policy, and it just depends on the school if they've decided to go with a school uniform as their preferred choice of dress code. So both policies, the apparel purchases at fair labor practice is up I-31 in February of 2020, and the school uniform dress code, school dress code, policy II-41 is also up for review February of 2020. I think what we want to separate is the RFP process from feedback on the policy. We want feedback on the RFP process first, and then that's going to help us when we look at revisions to the policy in February. It's going to feed sort of some of the proposed changes that we'll make at that time, February 2020.
So I think we should deal with that timeline after we talk about this. I'm going to go to trustee Murphy, because he's waiting.
This is what I get the most complaints about, and most of the people are already predisposed. They've already made up their mind on what the solution is. The solution is to get rid of the provider. But the reality of what their concerns are relate to quality and inventory issues. So I think you're on the right path. It has to be facilitated, because otherwise, if it's open, they're just going to say switch suppliers. And then also the discussion, it seems not as prevalent as the quality and inventory issues, is the issue of choice. So can they get their own pants, that type of thing? So I think those are the types of things. Mind you, that's more of a policy issue, but and then low level of choice, right? So which will impact the FRP. But I think you have to have it facilitated, otherwise it's just going to be a witch hunt.
I think we talked a little bit about whether or not, and there are some school boards that allow you to get your own pants, and one of them was Hamilton, but that was a trade-off. They went all uniform, and the trade-off was they could purchase their own pants and the crest. They had both options, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, right? You could get the uniform from the company or do your own. But all of the Catholic schools are uniform. Okay, so in the question, I think, is there anything else to add, or?
Did we determine the timelines?
You want us to determine the timelines, or we?
We had talked briefly about it. I think our thinking on it would be that it's mid-November already. I think people's minds won't be on it in December, so I think if we doing this in December, early, getting information out and start looking at late January, February to actually put this into place.
Would it make sense, and Stephanie may Superintendent Bowell may kill me, but it might make sense to postpone bringing up that policy then, so that we don't between feedback with process, we can take that into consideration when we are addressing the uniform policy. Trustee Agnew?
So I was going to say similar when I had my hand up. I just think that we need to just sort of stay siloed on this, because again, you talk uniform, it's going to go all over the place. So let's focus on the RFP. That's the first thing that's imminent. Let's really focus on what that looks like and get that feedback, and I think we need to stay united in that piece, and then we get the results of that, and then we move forward, because that's a whole other ballgame, right? So I agree. So I think that there's some validity to looking at that timeline.
Done. So if we start in January, you'll give us an idea of the timeline then, and do you need us to feed in on that, or I think the three of you are more than capable of...
I'm sure I'd like to think we can handle this. We certainly can keep you updated with the timelines, but we just wanted to make sure once you were good with the plan, we can kind of work on the implementation piece.
I think so, and I think actually, you know what, I know myself, I'd like to participate in this, because I think it's going to be an interesting exercise. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Did you want to say something? Sorry. I don't want to say your last name, Dan, because I'm not going to be able to say it.
Yeah, just to Calcic. And I apologize, I'm just having a little bit of a hard time wrapping my head, around how we're going about this. I know the policy is not up for review. Are we just looking at revisions to the program itself and not the policy? So we are going to entertain the fact that maybe at the end of the day, parents can get pants from Old Navy or Walmart and get their crested shirts from a uniform provider. Are we looking, is that what we're talking about in terms of a uniform program and making revisions to that?
No, I think this is specifically to the RFP process to getting a better provider, because we're having a lot of complaints. I know there was some conversation about people being able to purchase it, but I think we had a wholesome conversation about what that does to our cost with their...
So I think that there's been sort of muddied conversations around that, and I understand sort of the confusion, because we have a conversation with the RFP piece, so what does it look like from a provider perspective, and then what's it going to look like from numbers, inventory, all that sort of piece. But then when you have that conversation about the RFP as far as uniform provider and what that's going to look like, you can't help but go down the rabbit hole as far as other options for parents when it comes to purchasing pieces for their children. So I think we want to get feedback on what we're looking for from the vendors that we're considering. So again, choice, pricing, location, inventory, that sort of thing. Let's get the results of that and see what that looks like. And then I think we deal with the next bucket, if that makes sense. But they're going to lead into conversations about one another. It's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think that's what we're suggesting, though. I think if it comes up, it's going to come up organically.
Right.
And we'll, yeah. No, we're not pushing it forward, though. Yeah,
Okay,
I think that's what you're looking
So as long as that's not an option from an RFP perspective, my concern is that if we're gonna go into a 3-year term with a vendor, and then in, 2020 or 2021, we're going to change the policy, that would then change the spirit of the contract, and it would really throw everything out of whack. So if anything, we would like to make everything in line, but if we're not going to entertain the fact that parents may decide to change that program in some way, or we may change that program in some way, then I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure that when I'm going out for an RFP and it's a 3-year contract, that the spirit of it is not going to change so drastically that the awarded vendor would not be able to continue business on.
Well, sorry. If I can, Dan, I think that's the reason why I'm going out for consultation now, before you have to prepare the RFP and send something out. And I do think we need to be open to the possibility that it may change the program. If we're going in this honestly and transparently, if the feedback you get, let's say, is that, we don't want a sole uniform provider, we want options. We want 2, at least, or we want choice. I really do think that we're going to have to be responsive to the feedback that you get, and that will be a decision for the Board of Trustees. So I don't think we should go in there thinking and saying right now that we're not going to even entertain anything, because I think we have to be open to all options right now.
Can I ask a question to that, through you, Madam Chair? So you bring a good point up. And so is that something then that would form part of the contract with the selected provider, that we would put a clause in there that would say, and I'm just asking this because I don't know, we put a clause in there that would say that this could change, or this could, so that the chosen provider is clear that there could be an amendment at some point to that contract based on feedback? I don't know.
I'm sorry, but the timelines, the RFP doesn't actually go out until after this consultation's done. So we would decide what goes into that vendor, but I think the suggestion is we're not going out to parents and saying, we want to let you do whatever you want, but whatever comes back as feedback is what we'll look at. Sorry, Superintendent.
I think what I'm hearing Dan saying is, we're going to go through a process to get feedback on the RFP process. Then he's going to come up with the RFP, go out to vendors, and I think what he's worried about is then, in a relatively short period after that, we very might change the rules around the uniform, and how's the vendor gonna be able to do that?
Right, how do we
But if we coordinate it that right after we do that, that we deal with the policy, it's all about us being timely and making sure that we keep everything moving. So we really don't have a lot of wiggle room. Sorry, Trustee Agnew?
But then can we be timely, so I guess it depends on how we handle the policy with respect to uniform beyond that, because I don't know how timely we can be if we decide that that also needs to go out for any type of
Right, but...
consultation, or I'm just being cognizant of,
But that
sometimes we
would-
try to be timely and we're not.
But that shouldn't change the RFP, because if, for example, should we decide, should it come to the table that, you know, we want to phase in that every school, I'm going to use that as an example, every school will go to a uniform within a 2 or 3 year period. The only thing that could potentially mean is that they would you would add more, they would get more schools. Yeah, no, because it would be less.
But we could make a decision depending on, so that's an example of phasing it in and making more, could go the other way. It could be that I'm just not saying phase, but you just never know, right? We come to the table hoping that things will be done in an orderly, timely manner, and that doesn't always happen. So I just want to be cognizant of sort of where those lie, because those are all important points when we're going out for...
But we've already expanded the RFP to do this process in it. So if the notion is that no more uniform, would we not get that through the consultation process right now anyways? And then if we're gonna make that change, there's no need to even go through this no need to put out...
Here's the thing, Brenda, you really don't have to ask those questions, because the ones who want to tell you that are going to tell you that anyway. We want to try to be very specific with what we're asking, to kind of try to manage the consultation, but the reality is we're going to get everything they want us to hear anyhow. So you're going to have it to review by the time you're reviewing your policy anyhow.
Just a procedural motion item. We're at 10:01. Can I get a motion to expand? We're almost on this agenda, so just keep that in mind. A motion to extend? Yep. Trustee Murphy, seconded by Trustee Agnew. All in... So, Trustee Ian Tomasi in favor?
Yes.
Okay, Trustee Carabella has gone off the line. She left after the action item. I just didn't want to interrupt. Sorry.
So I hear exactly what you're saying, Andrea. So I think I'm just trying, we spent some time talking about how we want to make sure that the consultation that we're going out for is specific to the RFP process and try not to muddy that. I understand we're going to get different feedback from that. But again, that could be anecdotal feedback, because we're not asking those questions as part of the RFP process, if they want uniforms, if they don't, if they want, do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just...
Yes, it will be anecdotal, but it'll be recorded feedback, because we're still going to get, you can ask specific to the RFP, specific to the ideal uniform provider, and you're still going to hear, I don't want uniforms at all. And so that will be a theme of itself, that will be recorded, you are going to receive it formally as a board. We're not asking a question, but typically when you review, when it comes time to review the policy again, if you do make any changes that are based on, the other piece of it, which is in here, is the online survey. There's always that open-ended question for the online survey. What else do you want to share? You're going to get that. You're going to get that in there, so you're going to be equipped with what you want to hear or what you need to hear before you make any changes.
We've got 3 staff. Who wants to go first? We've got Superintendent Ballard. Okay, Superintendent.
So I just wanted to clarify that we can move both from February, and the reason why we put them together is because they need to go together, because the feedback that we get from the RFP is going to potentially dictate changes to our policy. So just so you're aware, that's why we would put them together. So in terms of the timeline, if we're talking about January, February, which is what I heard, we don't have a March policy meeting. The next is April. So does that work to move those items to the April meeting, Dan, in terms of RFP, et cetera?
It's extremely tight,
Okay.
and everyone's talking about not changing the policy, but if through this consultation it's decided that we're going to introduce multiple vendors, then that is a change to the policy, because currently the policy says that we're going to a sole supplier. So if that is the case, it has to come to policy, it has to pass, it has to go to board, it has to pass, and on we go. January, February, to do the consultation, I think we're really pushing our luck.
And so that goes back to why we had it scheduled in February, so that we had time, I think. we'd have to pull it up. And then if we do make changes to the policy that are significant enough in nature, we would share that for stakeholder feedback as well.
So what is the ultimate end time? I know, if you had to push it?
In all honesty, the likelihood, there's only really, I'll be honest, 3 vendors that could potentially pull this off for us. Of the 3, 2 are probably the only ones that, would the entire capacity of Halton Catholic District School Board. Having said that, the last time we went around, we ended up awarding, it was almost the end of August, and we saw the inventory issues when that contract started off. We really, it would be best just to give them 6 months. If the incumbent was awarded, it probably wouldn't be a big issue. If we're going to a new supplier, even if it was an experienced supplier like McCarthy's, for instance, they would still need that time to get that inventory in. So that's why we really want to ensure that we can award by the end of June, and that way that gives them 6 months for the kickoff. No excuses, inventories are in, and away we go. So that would be most ideal. I mean, if we have to go into the summer, we have to go into the summer, but you have to assume that everything is going to go clockwork. You're going to get your feedback, you're going to make sense of it, you're going to potentially make a change to the policy, it's going to come to the policy meeting, it's going to be approved to go to board, and at that, it gets approved as well. So if you're going to first reading, second reading, you're going to miss your deadlines.
Could we potentially, so would the last Tuesday of February, potentially, could we move the policy meeting in February? As long as we give enough notice to the public, we could move the policy meeting to the end of February. That might help, because we don't have a policy meeting in March. Thoughts? Do you think we'd be closer in timelines?
Like, we can be creative around the timelines. We can put our heads together. The other thing I just want to say, in just response to Trustee Agnew, when I did check the numbers as we were talking here, so there's 31 of 45 elementary schools, all of our high schools. So when I think about, what kind of questions we want to ask, well, we've had 31 plus 9 vote to have a uniform provider, uniform in the schools. So I feel like we've got a mandate from the majority to try and provide the best uniform program that we can for the system. So that's why we're trying to ask the question that way. Okay? When I have no skin in the game, right? But when I think about what, this is what I'm asked to do, I'm thinking of those 40 schools and how do we get them the best uniform program that we can.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
So would putting it to moving the policy meeting to deal with it the last Tuesday? Can we agree to that all now?
Would that be helpful?
It buys us 2 weeks, right?
On the other end?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, 2 weeks together.
Yeah, instead of the beginning of February.
And then it stays at 6 by that point, April.
Exactly. Is that okay? Okay. So it gives us enough time to put notice out, to post notice of the change in meeting? It does.
It's not an additional meeting.
No. We're changing the date, so we'll make sure that this is the first item on the agenda that day. I won't necessarily be chair, but we'll make sure. Okay? So we'll have pancakes for dinner. Pat's cooking.
I'll be flipping pancakes.
Okay?
Yeah.
So we can move on. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So moving on to 5.2, Policy I-35, Trustee Honoraria. Who wants to speak to this one? Okay, Trustee Agnew?
So I wanted to put this item on for discussion, and I welcome conversation from my fellow trustees. The one piece that I wanted to sort of bring to our attention was with respect to the attendance amounts. So I'm not sure if people are familiar with the honoraria policy, but I did take a look at the Education Act. And so in the Education Act, it does provide that trustees are eligible to receive an attendance amount for meetings. And I'm just, in our policy right now, it says that we're not calculated to receive it. It doesn't say that we are not supposed to receive it. It doesn't say that we are supposed to. Just in our policy, it says that our current honorarium does not include the calculation of those attendance amounts. So I just wanted to discuss that. I think it's in the Education Act. I believe we're entitled to it. I personally think that we should have that fund, that money, but I want to see what other people think.
Trustee Dewar?
So, Madam Chair, question to Director Daly is, why is it not being paid out when the Education Act calls for? Is there some reason why we chose to keep it back?
I'm not sure why we chose to. I think the Education Act says it may be paid out, not that it has to be paid out. In the kind of brief background check I did, I couldn't really find a rationale for it. I don't think we've ever paid it, but I can't confirm that. I know, at least in the trustee honorarium information that's on the board website, it goes back about, I think, to 2008, and it was, that line was there, so it's been at least 10 years, and in kind of informal conversations we've had, I don't believe we've ever paid it.
Follow-up question, Madam Chair. Follow-up question through you. Have we received monies from the government specifically for this purpose?
I'm going to, if Aaron's still on the line.
Yes, Colin here.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll let,
That's the line there for the honorarium. It's been put back into the board in the past. And like Superintendent, or Director Daly mentioned earlier, that's been our practice in the past as well. So to answer your question, Trustee Dewar, is yes, it has been, there is a funding line for it.
Thank you. Trustee DeRosa?
Madam.
Just 1 second, Trustee Intomasi. Trustee DeRosa has the floor, and then I'll hand it over to you.
How much money are we talking about here? Per meeting, per
Go ahead,
trustee?
Trustee.
So it's up to a maximum of $50 per trustee per meeting, and there's a definition of which meeting.
Trustee Intomasi?
Put in for the attendance amount and has received it.
I think, Trustee Intomasi, I think that's what Superintendent Lofts just confirmed. You confirmed that we do receive funds for the committee allocation.
We received funds for lots of different allocations, but it's a choice of the board whether to spend it on what it was originally derived from. That was a choice of the board in the past, as Director Daly mentioned. Our historical practice, going back 10 years, has been not to pay that amount.
I think what Trustee Intomasi was just saying was and correct me if I'm wrong, Trustee Intomasi, was that it's reported that there is committee fees but they're not actually being paid, so. Trustee Agnew.
So just wanted to read it just for the sake of having it there. It's in section 191. But it's under components of honorarium. So it just says, for a board of office beginning in 2006 or later, the honorarium for a member of the district school board in respect of any year of his or her term of office shall consist of such of the following components as the board determines, subject to section 4. So the base amount for the year, the enrollment amount for the year, the attendance amounts payable to the member for the year, and then the distant amounts payable to the member for the year. So I just wanted to think, for those who didn't know where that was from, that's right out of the Act.
Trustee Durek?
So, through Madam Chair, question to Director Daly Director Daly. Is there a good reason why the trustee should not be paid the amount that we have received and is in storage?
I think that's for trustees to decide.
Trustee Agnew?
I'll just put it out there transparently. I think we work really hard. And, we're all happy to sit on meetings. We don't for the compensation. We're there because we truly want to be a part of those conversations. We want to be on those committees because they're important to be on. But I also feel like it's part of our honorarium. It is there, it is outlined there that we are, entitled to receive it. Anyway.
Trustee O'Brien?
To piggyback on that, there also is the piece of the before and after. There's always a preparation for all these, and they are legislative meetings. And there is an after piece as well. So it's not just the meeting. I would say if you calculate it down to a dollar value per hour, it's probably not very much at all. If you look at the actual time and thought we put in all these legislative meetings. So I would be in support of it.
So are you proposing then that it change to reflect that instead of it saying the attendance amount may be paid, to say that the attendance amount shall be paid to a member? And to the maximum amount? Sorry, Superintendent Daly? So I've looked at other boards and how it's written, and it's quite generic, and it's actually less detailed than what this is, and basically what it states is it'll pay the base amount plus the enrollment, the attendance fee to the max, so that it allows for any changes that may happen through the Act. The board does, none of the honorariums, it's not, the attendance fee is in addition to the honorarium fee, so that's gotta stay. I think it just needs to say the attendance amount shall be paid to a member for attending any committee. Sorry, go ahead, Trustee Ag.
So I did take a look just to see sort of what some of the wording was at boards that are similar to ours, to get a sense of what they were doing, and, the wording is all over the place. But, it could be as simple as, there's one, so our coterminous board just says, for the term of office in respect of the period from December 1st, 2014 or later, the board will pay to a member an honorarium amount not to exceed the following amount, and then it has 100% of the maximum base amount, 100% of the maximum enrollment amount, and 100% of the maximum allowable attendance amount. So I don't know if that's some wording that we want to use. Anyways, like I said, they're all kind of all over the place.
If I,
Sorry.
Madam Chair?
Get Trustee Antomasi and...
So, just to shed some more light on the attendance amount. The attendance amount is very much like the executive compensation. The money gets passed on to... I'm sorry?
Go ahead.
I can't hear anybody.
Go ahead, Trustee Antomasi, you have the floor.
I didn't get that.
You have the floor, we're listening.
So what I was saying with reference to I can't talk because I'm getting feedback here.
We're listening, Trustee Antomasi. I think it's just, there might be somebody asking clarification off on the side, but we're sitting here listening.
So I will try again. What I was referring to is the attendance amount works very much like the amount that was passed to the board on executive compensation. It went into the board coffers, and it was never paid out to the people that it was supposed to go to. In the case for trustees, it's exactly the same.
Okay, so trustee Agnew is proposing a change to the policy, which will pay the attendance amount. Are you,
For consideration. So it could be something like attendance amount of $50 per meeting will be paid to trustees attending statutory committee meetings as required by the Education Act and its regulations. You could put $50 or up to the maximum as allocated, something to that effect. That's just simple. I don't know if that...
I was just... That clearly indicates...
Trustee DeRosa?
Just a point of interest, do we know for a fact that at some point in time in the past, all knew here to some degree, that, that fee?
Superintendent?
I think that may have been the case, but I don't think we've got a motion, like, there's nothing in writing that indicates one way or the other. Like, we couldn't find a motion, or, I think it's just been a past practice.
Out of it.
I'm not sure. Begin with, but I don't know for sure.
Madam Chair, Trustee Antamasi brought up a very good point that money's been sitting there for many years. I'm just wondering whether the back pay can be whenever, so, because the money's sitting there.
I think that that's something that we could decide here ultimately. If it's there and if Superintendent Loss has said that the money has actually been paid by the ministry, then it was something that was accounted for in the budget. Trustee Agnew?
I just want to make a comment, for what Trustee DeRosa said. I don't think it's so much that it has petered out, and I can't speak to past practices, but I can let you know that when several of the trustees started our term, we inquired about that amount, and we were told we don't get paid it, and so we just didn't think to ask again about it. So I don't think it's been that it's petered out, or it's been ignored, or but perhaps that's been the conversation, and I'm just suggesting that people in the past may have asked about it and were told it's not paid out, and they left it at that. So I just wanted to comment on that.
Okay, so can we then, we'll bring it back as an action item for the next meeting. Okay, thank you. So moving on to item 5.3, policy V-03, photography, advertising, and sales representatives. Trustee Agnew, you're up again.
So I just wanted so this had come up when we first, and again, that's why I'm glad it's on her discussion item. I just wanted to discuss it with my fellow trustees. But this had come up previously when we were sort of first reviewing policies, as when we started off in our term. And one of the discussions we had was around the advertising piece. And I just wanted to bring it back again for discussion because there were some things that have transpired. So there were some issues that were brought forward before when we discussed this, and there's been some that have transpired since then. And really it was around when information goes to the board, right, for consideration from an outside vendor or for advertising purposes, we know that it has to go through a process there for approval, it gets stamped, and then it is schools, and it's sort of left up to the discretion of the schools as far as whether or not they want to distribute that to their school communities. And I had expressed before that I think sometimes there can be a breakdown there. We're not, when you take a look at, maybe let's say a 5-kilometer radius where you may have, or 10-kilometer radius where you may have 3 of our schools, the parents talk, the students talk, there's a lot of, they just share back and forth. And we run into situations where we see that something has been communicated out to one school but not to others. And I use simple examples of C&E passes or bowling passes or information on camps and things like that. And so, my conversation that I wanted to have a little bit was, is there not an element for us to just have that information go to the schools and then have them distribute that in some means, whether it's printed, whether it's on their newsletter, whether it's on their website. But I feel like if it's been approved by the board, just think that it should flow through to the parents. So,
No, any questions? Oh, trustee Gu?
I'm gonna have to agree with trustee Agnew. This comes up repeatedly, and it actually came up at the SEAC meeting, from around the table, where we have one school that's doing one thing, and the school down the street, in the same family of schools, that isn't doing it. And it leads, the question is, and I understand the whole people's having some autonomy and being able to do what they need to do based on their school, but there are things that are generic pieces, and if it's been said that it's okay here for it to be disseminated amongst our parents, we do everything else that we send out blanket-wide. Information with policies, we're doing the consultation piece that it potentially affects everything. Why do we then say that the information stops there and it's not free-flowing? I have a hard time that some schools get some information that may be beneficial and the other schools don't get it.
Sorry, did you want to reply,
I just wanted to
Superintendent?
ask what the example was of something, of what you said in one school and then down the street that was different. Was there something in particular?
Yeah, so for example, at SEAC, one of the things was brought up was the mental health presentation was done, and we had a whole conversation that, how it will be shared amongst the parents, and, we talked about the pamphlets, and I'm gonna use a very specific example. So we talked about these brochures that have been done specifically, as part of that committee that was put together for mental health. And then one of the things that came out of it was that each school is required to have its own mental health strategy. Not every school family is aware of that, and that's something that isn't. Now, that's not necessarily an advertisement piece, but it's something that comes down from the board, that it's a plan, it's an action plan that's in place, and it's not necessarily shared consistently through all the families of schools. And I know it's not necessarily particular to this policy, but it's an example in regards to information that comes out here at the board. It's supposed to be shared, and it's not necessarily consistently shared with all the schools.
Trustee, I almost called you superintendent. Trustee Duarte.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I've come across this situation happening in the past. There is another policy, distribution of promotional material, and there it says quite clearly that it's up to the principal to distribute it. I'm just wondering why we put in that statement. If it's approved by the board, I think the principal should be automatically doing it. Is there a particular reason why we did that?
Superintendent Bell?
Sure. So the policy you're referring to is V17, and we did have a fulsome discussion about it last year. And as you said, Superintendent, or Trustee Agnew, we're all confusing our titles. That was January, so it was one of the first policies that we reviewed as a group. That policy in particular does speak to the request from outside providers for promotion and distribution of program activity-related materials through the school board. So those items do come to my attention because it's part of my policy, or my portfolio. I would review those items, and then as you say, it is at the discretion of the principal. Some things, we need to be respectful, and I know we've had conversations about this, and we may not always agree, but there are certain things that are at the discretion of the principal. And the flip side of what you're suggesting around schools not getting all of the same items, let's talk about the CNE or something like that. If a principal gets feedback through their school council, and sometimes this happens, that they're getting too much stuff sent home. If we put something in a policy that takes out the decision-making of that principal who knows their community, then they're bound by that in a policy, and they're not being responsive to the feedback that they get from their own school community. I really feel that most principals, when they're getting those items, I know I was a principal for almost 15 years, as soon as I saw that letter saying it was approved for distribution, I would share that. And I think that asking for examples helps me better understand where the roadblocks are in terms of items not being shared. So the example that you provided around the mental health brochure, if it's our own internal brochure through our mental health lead, that wouldn't come through me at all. Permission to distribute are externals that are coming, and that's where I do my checks and balance, see what our history's been, I check them out. If it's something like the mental health brochure, that's something that would be disseminated to all of our schools because it comes from our mental health lead. So that's a helpful example, because my question would be, then why isn't it going into our schools if it's something that we are internally producing and saying this is our recommendation and it's a good resource? And there are some school councils that don't appreciate, and I have to speak for the flip side, don't appreciate those flyers or the materials or the invitations, and we only approve nonprofit. So even those that have a fee attached, they have to demonstrate to me that they're willing to compensate some families in our schools, because it is an undue hardship for some families who can't afford these activities, and then families become upset that their child's come home with this flyer and they can't afford for them to participate.
Just a housekeeping issue before we get to you, Trustee Agnew. We'll have to vote to extend the meeting. Do we have a mover? Trustee Duarte, Trustee Guzzo, all in favor? Motion passes.
In favor.
Oh, sorry, Vince, I forgot you were there. My apologies. Trustee Agnew?
Thank you. So through you, Mr. Chair. So, and I appreciate what, I mean, I've sat on council for a number of years, so I appreciate that. I mean, I guess the flip side to that is in my experiences, I haven't heard parents complain they get too much information from the board. I tend to hear it the other way, but I appreciate there's a lot that can go home. They can be inundated with information if that is the case. And I think what I'm looking at here is it doesn't have to go in a flyer situation. It doesn't have to go, but I don't like when I receive information from families that say, why did Sacred Heart of Jesus get it and, St. Christopher didn't get it, or why don't, and so I just feel like if there's not an opportunity to put that through in a flyer, can it go in a newsletter? Can it go on the website? Is there a way for us to house it on our board and they can make a reference? I'm just trying to, I know that principals are there for the right reasons. I know they're not trying to hold back information. I do. I totally appreciate that. But you also get principals that are sometimes newer to that school community, or, the reality is that there is information that does not go out to all of the schools, and I'm just trying to help with that communication piece. And
Director Daly?
Some examples of stuff, like, is it like, weird science or ukulele lessons or that kind of stuff?
some of it, yes. It could be passes for things like it. I mean, this sounds trivial. That's why I like to give. I don't have the wealth of all the examples. I can pull them, but an example like CNE passes. That's something where it's not an extenuating amount. That's going to be it's actually a free pass. And there was a lot of families that were going this. We didn't get one. Why did you get one? And same with things like the bowling passes. And, I don't want to minimize that because, again, families do talk and they wish that they had access to those things. Some of it is lessons, or it could be weird, mad science-based, or it could be, I guess I'm just always cognizant of us being able to say to families, here are options. Here are programs that we have vetted to be good programs that we think our school communities could benefit from. And we just want to make sure that there's a way for us to communicate that out to families. And I feel like if it's being approved by the board, I want families to know that that is an option for them. And I don't know the means to which we do that. Again, does that come through the board website? Is there a way to direct them to that? I don't know the answer, but...
We'll have Trustee Guzzo, then Trustee O'Brien.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, just to follow up on that, and maybe it's not the board website. If it is an issue of too much paper, every school has either school online, they're everybody's set up now online. Everybody has their own websites. We get a week at a glance. There's always something posted on there, so that's something that can be looked at that way. I think it's just important, again, it's free information, it's free-flowing information. And yes, we know that we're school community first, but we're board. We belong to the same board. And Oakville might get something different than Burlington, than to Milton, than to Halton. But the point is then that's fine. But then all of the Oakville schools should not feel that some get them and some don't. I think it's just about consistency. And if it's about too much paper, then the solution is adding it to the website, right? And whether it be the board website or the school website. I think that's an easy fix if it's the paper issue, right? We allow people to opt out on emails now. We're doing that on paper, so, you know, you can opt out to not get flyers home, I guess, if that be the case. So, but I myself have not heard that they get too many papers sent home. I've actually heard the opposite complaint, that when it goes online, that it's not enough reminders.
Trustee O'Brien?
Okay. I think more information is better than too little, because you can't say no to something you don't know. If you don't know what's available, you can't say yes or no to it. So if it is too much, you can just put it in the recycling. So maybe they are complaining about sending too much stuff home, but I think at least gives the parents the option, if they could say yes or no, so.
Okay. So do we want to look at the wording of the policy? Where do we want to go with this?
What's the discussion item, do you want to bring it up?
I think it's the wrong policy.
Yeah.
I think,
It's V17.
I mean, we do address the advertising piece in this, we do address the board piece in this, so is there two policies that this falls under? Because we do address that in this one, right? So. I'm happy to have it come back with some suggested wording to it that we can take a look at. If there's two policies it refers to, but this is applicable, this policy, for that advertising piece.
Okay, Trustee O'Brien?
Question, thank you to Mr. Chair, to Superintendent Baloff. Superintendent Baloff, when you do approve something, you do send it out to everybody, right? It's blanket, it goes to every elementary if it's, okay.
So through you, Mr. Chair, we would send documentation that would say it's been approved, and it's at the principal's discretion what they choose to do with the material. And we post it actually on a site. We have a permission to distribute staff site, so principals, if they have a question or are wondering if they've been approved or denied, they can go right to our board site or staff site and see who's on the approved or the denied site.
All right, here's one question for that. So could a principal then put their own thing on there without your approval ever?
No. So we're the only ones, Janine, we have access to that. I think Pat wants to say something.
Director Daly, then Trustee Guzzo.
just two things. When Superintendent Ballo puts it on the site, what she's saying is it's met the requirements of the policy.
Mm-hmm.
We're not advocating for it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, here's a great program we think schools should do. It's
Mm-hmm.
this particular request for distribution has met the requirements to be distributed. We're not advocating it. And I think for the photography, advertising, sales reps, I'm just looking at it again. I think the advertising refers to like advertising, like advertising on your school uniforms or your yearbook advertiser. So I think it's a different, I'm not sure it's got that as clear a connection on this one.
Trustee Guzzo?
So, thank you, through Mr. Chair. Just one more question. So, you had used as an example that, let's say a school doesn't want more flyers. Has there been any other, like, reason where a principal would say, we shouldn't hand it out? And let's use an example as the C&E passes. Like, what would be a valid reason for a principal to decide not to hand that out?
Sorry, I can answer that one. The C&E one is actually not promoted because of OSB saying that we don't want to have kids falling off of a ride and then blaming the school board for giving them the passes.
So then that wasn't an approved, I thought I got that home. I got that this year, so.
So I can't, I have the email that says that we would not approve them distributing them. So if they sent them to the schools and the schools gave them out, then I can't.
Okay, so let me use a different, I don't know, whatever example it might be, whatever pass it might be, would there be a reason for them not to? Be a reason.
Not
Sure.
like a soccer program or a camp, or what would be a reason?
What would be a reason where a principal would decide, yeah, I'm not gonna hand this?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can say my personal experience, usually the reason comes down to parents, are not appreciative of the fact that these opportunities are being sent home and their child is disappointed for whatever reason because they won't be participating. Sometimes we get the same feedback around book fairs. That's another, we send home the shiny flyers about book fairs, does not come through me, but it does come out through the school, and some students have the opportunity to participate in a book fair and some don't. So that's where a principal knows their community, and they may determine that it's not the appropriate time to send something home. Or as a school, they're running a fundraiser that month, they have a number of other asks, so they're cognizant of what they're asking for, so they wouldn't put that out there. And you did mention, Trustee Agnew, about a program, let's say. So that doesn't come through permission to distribute either. So if Mad Science or Ukulele, or there are lots of different programs, want to run a program at a school over the lunch hour, that's done in consultation with the school principal. It doesn't come through me, but the principal does approve any flyer, and it's really sort of a permission form at the school level. So there's where you'd have a discrepancy as well.
That's not the example, but I hear what you're saying.
But you mentioned Mad Science program, so that's what we think about.
Dr. Daly mentioned it. I'm talking more about camps, we always get the flyer that comes home for the camps that are being run from Corpus Christi, the All-Star Camp, but there's other camps that come through that, again, we don't see. So I understand the Mad Science piece, I do. The ukulele lessons, I'm going with the examples that Director Dilly had given, it's not a fault of anyone's. But there are pieces that go through. So again, I understand we don't want to flood people with it, but I believe that there has to be an element for us to share that information. If they don't want it to come through because kids are going to see it, and mom and dad don't want to be in a situation where they have to deny that, let's put it in a newsletter. Kids are not looking at the newsletters, or let's put it on a website. So at least we know that the parents have been made that information, so we don't get a phone call saying, why did this flyer go home at Sacred Heart of Jesus and it didn't go home at St. John's? Because it does happen, and we do get those.
Sure. Or Trustee DeRosa?
So just an observation, as I hear the discussion going on. I think it's very valid that information that is worthy of distribution, making sure that everybody gets it. But I try to balance that with the encroachment or the potential encroachment on the principal's discretion in handling his local community. We do have competent people running our schools, and generally speaking, who have been put there to exercise discretion. I'm concerned that maybe this is just another way of taking, the power of decision from them. That's all.
Trustee Agnew?
So, I understand where you're coming from, Trustee DeRosa. I think there's a fine line between asking to send home a camp flyer or a free pass for bowling, as opposed to trying to dictate to principals what they do from other aspects within their school. So I understand we don't want to be trying to take away their autonomy to make decisions or impart on them what they have to do. I think this is the communication piece. I'd like to see more information flow through to the parents. It's already being approved at the board level. So my suggestion would be is if there's a possible way for us to bring this back with some suggested wording to the applicable policy, and then we can vote on it or have it, whatever, for the next meeting. That would be my, and if trustees don't agree, then, hey, I brought forward my concerns on it.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that we don't bring it forward. What I'm saying is it's just a word of caution, that's all.
Okay, so we have consensus to have a look at the wording and have it come back to us? Okay, good.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Trustee Murphy. So, information items, Administrative Procedure VI-70, Educational Field Trips. Superintendent Bowell, right on you.
Through you, Madam Chair, we have 3 corresponding procedures that went with the field trip policy. I know we had some conversation about bringing it back around accessibility. I don't think that that applies to the current procedures. They have been approved as are, so VI 70 educational field trips, we added a number of associated policies and procedures that again are mentioned in the body of the procedure. We also included the reference to the Ontario Highway Traffic Act, since it does reference transportation in the document. Page 4 of 6, we did add language around a waiver and a letter that we use. It's been our practice for the number of years. There's an annual business memo that goes out, and we thought that that language was important enough to embed right into our procedures, so administrators, et cetera, are not looking for that language in a separate memo. So that's page 4 of 6, and you'll see the language that was added there and approved by senior team. I don't know if there are any questions. The next corresponding procedure is VIO 7, and this one speaks to the transportation of students by other students. Again, we added the same reference to the procedure because it applies to transportation. We have added a line indicating that all applicable Ministry of Transportation regulations are followed. It wasn't explicitly stated in the previous procedure, and we also updated the language on page 2 of 10 in the procedure to include the most current language right from the Ministry of Transportation regarding handheld communication. There have been a number of changes since this procedure was updated. It was last updated in 1996, so it was due to have an update with the language there for sure. And then the last procedure that we updated is VI 14, transportation of students by volunteer drivers. Again, the reference to the Ontario Highway Traffic Act was added, and the reference to the Ministry of Transportation and updated distracted driving, seatbelt laws, et cetera, are reflected in that procedure. And then the last procedure that was approved was procedure VI 28, which is the selection and appointment of positions of academic administration responsibilities. So we've already had some conversation around the corresponding policy this evening, hiring and promotion. The change that was made in this procedure is on page 3, it's page 129 of your package, and the bullet that said a trustee representative was modified to say up to 3 trustee representatives, which is still aligned with what was said in the policy this evening. And Trustee Agnew, you had asked how, and the language is still there. That was there previously. It's at the discretion of the director. So I'm going to leave the procedure as is. It was approved on November 4th. My suggestion would be, upon further review, maybe since we'd had a more fulsome conversation this evening about policy changes, if you think that there's something we need to take into consideration, we can do that at a future meeting. And that's it for my procedures.
Thank you. I think we might need to look at the 6.4, which is the VI 28, so that it falls in line with the policy.
Yeah.
I think that would probably be just off the hop, that it, instead of it saying up to 3, it would say 3, because I think that's what the motion read, was 3 trustees.
Approval, that'll be in the procedure too.
Procedures don't come to the board for approval.
Right. So right off the hop, I'll strike up to, and then I'd say if there's something glaring, you can let me know.
Okay, so then 6.5, as you can see, those are upcoming agenda items. I don't need to go through all of these for you. We've got item 7, no miscellaneous information. Item 8, there's no need to go in camera. Item 9, we need a motion to excuse absent committee members. Trustee DeRosa, seconded by Trustee Dewart. And then we have, can we have a motion to adjourn? Trustee Murphy, seconded by Trustee DeRosa. Trustee Carabella isn't with us, so I guess I will lead us in closing prayer. If you'll all join me in the sign of our faith, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. We'll do in our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not to temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.